to kind of be there for the victims and stand in solidarity with them.
Yeah, and then that former TPUSA chapter VP from Emerson College, KJ, will be breaking down exactly what happened with her, because we're living in an indoctrination nation. And also there's mask mandates, there's vaccine mandates, so much to break down at Emerson College. And then we will be breaking down a little bit of March for Life, and then also the Defeat the Mandates March as well. So Isabel, I know, has got some great content she wants to talk to us about. Yes, her and Alex Clark were out there. They did some great work.
On the front lines. Can't beat that.
And then right after that, it's Monday. So, you know, you got Morgan Zegers' show, Freedom Papers. She's joined by producer of the Charlie Kirk Show, Clegg, and they're going to talk about Federalist paper number 14. So what that is, get this.
Okay.
We're not the history buffs here.
No, we're not.
Morgan is. So go to Morgan for this, but this is what they're going to do. They're breaking down Madison's objections to the proposed Constitution from extent of territory answered. What does that mean in layman's terms? She weighs in on the advantages of creating a republic instead of a democracy, because we live in a republic.
Yes. Yes, we got to make that known. There's so many times that we're living in a democracy. No, we live in a republic. Let it be known. Speak the truth.
And then right after that, you got a pop doc for POPlitics with Alex Clark. She's talking about the Ruby Ridge siege. It talks about blatant government overreach, what the FBI's involvement was in that whole debacle. It's pretty wild. So you got that. And then before we let you go, did you watch the NFL playoffs this last weekend?
I did not. I'm one of the few people who have not seen it.
Break
it down.
This was the best round of playoffs in the history of the NFL.
Fantastic.
Obviously, there's a lot of people right now watching. It's like, you don't really like the NFL. There's social justice nonsense, like the social justice slogans in the end zone, blah, 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 blah. I mean, in general, we can enjoy sports at times once they get that nonsense out of the way. Yeah. And I'm sure that's the reason why you don't watch.
Pretty much.
But every single game ended in a walk-off.
Are you kidding me?
Every single game. Every single one. And then even yesterday, the nightcap. It was Josh Allen of the Bills against Patrick Mahomes of the Chiefs. Went to overtime, and it was a walk-off touchdown to Travis Kelce. It was an unbelievable weekend of football. And then this next weekend, we got the NFC Championship and the AFC Championship. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
Not as much fun as you're going to have today on TPUSA Live. Great live stream. Coming up next, we got Human Events Daily with Jack Posobiec. We'll see you soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events Daily, powered by Turning Point USA. Today's top stories. President Biden may send thousands of U.S. troops to the Russian border as Germany and France hold talks with Russia without the United States. Second, massive pro-life and anti-mandate marches were held in Washington, D.C. Also coming up, corporate sponsors are skipping the CCP Olympics. Huge story breaking on this. And then finally, huge news out of Epoch Times. The CCP's Huawei paid none other than Tony Podesta $1 million for lobbying the Biden White House. All of this and more ahead, Human Events Daily. Well, we told you about this a week ago. Before anybody, here, Human Events Daily, we told you that Biden administration wanted to institute a policy of wag the dog with Russia and Ukraine because of their massive domestic policy failures. And now we've been getting nothing more than a full drumbeat. The war drums are out. Ron Klain, the chief of staff, is running around Washington, D.C., telling people that President Biden is going to be the new Patton, and he'll go down in history as the president that finally defeated Putin. The guy can barely defeat, a press conference. He can't even make it through. He can't even make it through his own prepared remarks. He's got to walk those back. Understand, they wanted a managed decline. That was what the Biden administration used to say. That's what the Obama administration used to say. Now it's in total free fall. So look at the situation. The U.S. is discussing military deployments on the Russian border, right? So they want to send troops, thousands of U.S. troops, our soldiers, into harm's way, into the Baltic states, which border Russia, as the West is stepping up its response to Russian threats. That's out of NBC. However, listen to this. Newsweek. Ukraine condemns the United States' decision to begin evacuating people from the country. Well, hold on a second. I thought that all of this was going to go like to crazy. You know, I thought the conflict was imminent. Why is Ukraine attacking the U.S. for this? Oh, and then you look at some of the statements here. This is a premature manifestation of excess caution. The Ukraine foreign minister actually said, in fact, there have been no radical changes in the security situation recently. The accumulation of Russian troops near the state border began in April of last year. Understand when you are the dog being wagged. That's what's going on. And then finally, the EU is not pulling their diplomats from Kiev while the U.S. is. So explain it to me. Why is it that the U.S. is doing everything they can to say conflict is imminent, conflict is imminent, conflict is imminent, and yet the EU doesn't seem, right. When you've got two dogs barking, you understand that there's a threat. But when you've got one dog barking and one dog that isn't barking, one of those dogs knows something that the other one doesn't. And now France and Germany are going to be holding independent talks with Russia in Paris this week outside of the EU. This is a major embarrassment for President Biden and a massive embarrassment for Secretary of State Tony Blinken, who's already seen as a massive embarrassment because of Kabul just about 5 months ago. But I want to take everybody back to a few years ago, because there is a clip that came out, and we talked about this all throughout 2020. But I think people have forgotten just why it is that President Biden and the Biden family care so much about Ukraine. Let me take you back into the Wayback Machine.
So I got Ukraine, and I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of got fired. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money.
Remember, Hunter Biden was getting $50,000 a month from Burisma, which is a state-related enterprise in Ukraine. This is one set of oligarchs versus another set of oligarchs. This is not in the national interest of the United States of America to get involved with a border dispute that's been going on over there for 30 years in the current instance, but in some instances going back hundreds of years. If you look at the tensions between Moscow and Kiev, we do not have an interest. The Biden administration has an interest in wagging the dog. That's what this is all about. And unfortunately, and I said this the other day, and now I'm going to have to say it again, you are going to get good people killed in Ukraine the same way you did in Kabul if you keep pushing forward with this madness. Respect our people, respect the children of this country. Do not put them in harm's way for no reason. Well, over the weekend, 2 massive marches took place in Washington, D.C. Both, when you think about it, really, both standing up for freedom. So on Friday, I was able to attend the March for Life. This was a massive outpouring for the freedom and really for the life of the unborn innocent. Unborn, they're also called preborn children that under Roe v. Wade, which was passed in 1973, have been allowed in many circumstances, right, to be killed. Right? This procedure was legalized throughout the country. However, the biggest thing that I've heard from the March for Life, talking to people there, and you saw, I would say, there's obviously a very strong religious element to it. So you've got a lot of churches bring people, a lot of Catholic schools, universities bring people in, and they come from all around the country. Even when I was in high school, 20 years ago, we were coming down with the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, and we would come down, we would do Mass at the National Basilica in the morning, and then a prayer service, and then we would go out to the march. And I gotta tell you, it was freezing cold on Friday, but that didn't deter people. You probably had 25 to 30,000 people at that march. This is one of the biggest marches that I've seen, coming from the conservative side in a very, very long time. And certainly, honestly, quite frankly, it's the biggest march I've seen from the conservatives since January 6th, probably the biggest event of all since January 6th that's taken place. So that shows that it can happen again. And, were there feds there? Undoubtedly, right? But the fact of the matter is there were so many people who were so positive, who were so standing on the side of peace, that were standing on the side of God, that were standing on the side of fighting for the rights of the unborn. It was just a truly amazing sight to see. And the one thing I've always said that I find so remarkable is that at the March for Life, every single person who's there is marching for somebody else. None of those people derive direct benefit, right, from that. And so, of course, we broke down on the show the other day that it does look like that Roe v. Wade could potentially be overturned this year, or at least, majorly changed if the Supreme Court comes down in their decision in Missouri. That was the first march. The second march was the Defeat the Mandates March. Take a look. We've got video that I want to play for you for this chant from the crowd.
I also want you to know, spoiler alert, freedom wins.
Incredible. And now we actually got to visit with Dr. Malone the night before. We went out to dinner with Dr. Malone and JP Sears, Steve Kirsch, a few of the other people who were there. Amazing event. And what was so interesting to me about the Defeat the Mandates March was that it wasn't something that you could easily fit into one box of, is this conservatives or is this liberals? Is it left wing? Is it right wing? It's not. It's really not. That was a true dissident. I really have to stress that. It's a dissident march of people who are saying, and by the way, there were marches all around the world this weekend. Brussels, you saw this. In Amsterdam, the stuff that's going on in Paris. Marches all around the world against vaccine mandates. And many areas, by the way, the mandates are already coming off. The UK just announced this, the restrictions are coming off. Ireland just announced the restrictions are coming off. So what's going on, Washington, D.C.? In Washington, D.C., in our nation's capital, we have mandates. So where this march was going on, the steps of Lincoln Memorial, technically, they were all under mandate, every single person there. So the question is, why are they still pushing this? And I just said in the last segment, right, when we were talking about the Ukraine-Russia situation, that if you have two dogs barking, you see a threat. But if you have one dog barking and one dog that isn't, then one of those dogs knows something that the other one doesn't. So what is it? What does the UK know? What does Ireland know? What do all these countries and areas know that are dropping the restrictions versus places like the US, where you got the Biden administration that's continuing to push for a federal mandate, at least for federal workers? Then you've also got areas like Washington, D.C., like New York City, like Los Angeles, and other areas that are pushing a vaccine mandate. Like, you go to the South, by the way. So we're actually doing the show out of Nashville today. You go to the South, it's like COVID doesn't exist. It's like people are just back to normal. And they've been like this, by the way, for about a year. They are not going along with it the same way that the northern and the blue cities are. They're just not doing it. The northern states, the blue cities, it's like you guys have one view on it and other states have another view on it. Texas, Florida. And by the way, go look at the rates. And I checked this. All you fact checkers out there, you're going to come at me on this. 36% down. Cases are down 36% in Texas and Florida. Omicron has peaked. And by the way, Omicron has peaked in New York State and New York City as well. So if this thing has peaked, it's on the downside. We saw that deaths didn't go up the same way they did for other variants. And what are those two words that you're not supposed to say, that they don't want anyone to say, that is conferred that if you get Omicron and then you recover? Natural immunity. The two words that you're not supposed to say, they don't want anybody to say. Why? Because nobody can make money off of natural immunity. The same way that nobody's cashing checks if there isn't conflict in Ukraine and Eastern Europe. That's why the US government, in many of these cases, is feeding off of conflict. Winter storm Jasper has made landfall. The Carolinas are getting pounded. You've got, according to FlightAware, 213 flights in the U.S. have already seen cancellations today, with 535 more delayed. From Chicago to Newark to Houston to Atlanta, the Carolinas, the Virginia, the Atlantic coast. Winter storm Jasper is smashing down. This is a storm squall. You're also getting lake effect in some areas. Folks, be warm this winter. Go to mypillow.com, use promo code POSO. You get all your new warm beddings. You get the robes, you get the slippers. You need to bundle up. We got the blankets over there. So mypillow.com, promo code POSO. Winter storm Jasper is only the first one. And by the way, we're in Nashville today. Nashville's actually pretty nice. Nashville, we're doing okay. But back home in D.C., we were seeing temperatures with the wind chill. It was down 18 degrees. 12 degrees in sometimes. When we were out for these marches, those people, those brave freedom fighters who were out there, freezing, below freezing cold. So that's why you go, if you're going to be planning any of this activity, or if you're just at home with your kids, you want to keep everybody warm, you go to mypillow.com, promo code POSO, you stock up now before the next winter storm, the ice hits you. We got to get into this next story, because here's something that Human Events Daily has been talking about for a while now. We're going to bring it back up. Out of the Wall Street Journal, they finally picked it up. So this has been what we've seen, the dynamic, that we talk about something here at Human Events Daily, and then the Wall Street Journal picks it up a week or two later. The Winter Olympics in Beijing find sponsors caught between Beijing and the U.S. Visa, P&G, and Coca-Cola are keeping a relatively low profile as Washington highlights human rights in Xinjiang. This is a massive, massive win for the entire world vis-a-vis the CCP regime, right? And I told you this. Look, I don't know if you guys understand how the world works, but the marketing budgets for Visa, right, P&G, Coca-Cola, you were talking about some of the biggest marketing firms and marketing budgets in the entire world, right? You're talking, these companies have the same, their marketing budget is the size of the GDP of some of the small countries out there. So P&G, not running ads. Visa, you haven't seen the ads. Coca-Cola, they're only doing ads inside China for the Winter Olympics, nowhere else. And then NBC, it's amazing because they're doing light ads, and then they'll say Winter Olympics 2022, really big, and then all the way down in the corner, it says Beijing. What's up with that? What's going on? And I just saw this one, it was going viral last night. There's a new Jurassic Park movie coming out, and this is called Jurassic World Dominion. So go and look at this ad, because while you're watching it, right, it shows a skier, and she's on the ski slope. It doesn't look like it's in Beijing. It doesn't even look like it's in China. And the only mention of China anywhere in this ad is like all the way down in the corner. Again, it says Beijing. Take a look at this. So you understand what's going on. The world has finally woken up to this, because this is corporate America now. These are the corporate multinational giants. Or Coca-Cola, that's out of Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. We are putting the pressure on these brands to stay out of the CCP, to stay out of doing business with the butchers, the genociders, and the brutal dictator that is Xi Jinping. Now, I've said it before, these Olympics are going to be his coronation as chairman for life. So the Olympics are still going on. But understand that when you see this now, when you see this, you understand that this is an inflection point in history. The people of the free world are not going to go along with this. Look, they want us. They want you to just be a subservient renter class of consumers. So China manufactures the goods, we consume them. And we're just supposed to take it, and then we see, and there's a new Netflix, there's a new Jurassic Park. You just swipe, you're swiping along, and you're not supposed to care about any of these things. You're not supposed to care about the million Uyghurs in concentration camps. You're not supposed to care about what the CCP is doing around the world. You're not supposed to care about that lab in Wuhan. Well, guess what? The people care, and corporate America is showing the truth. Well, we just got a massive story out of Epoch Times, and I have to tell you, it's one of those things where it's a bombshell, and it is a legitimate bombshell, but at the same time, when you hear this one, you're like, you know what? We knew. We knew this was happening. We knew this was exactly what was happening. The CCP's Huawei is paying their top U.S. lobbyists $1 million to lobby the Biden White House. And who could it be? Who could it be that the CCP would bring in to hire as their top lobbyists for the Biden White House? None other than your favorite and mine, Tony Podesta. Yes, that's right. Tony Podesta, the brother of John Podesta, was paid $500,000 in Q4 of 2021, and then another $500,000, bringing his sum total of lobbying all the way up to $1 million to lobby for Huawei, which of course is installing or trying to install China's version of 5G. They want to come into the US, they want to get into our infrastructure. This is essentially like if you had the KGB in the Cold War coming to the US and saying, hey, would you like us to maybe install telephone lines for White House? It'd be very nice to do this. It would be great. I think we'll have good communication, great success. Yeah, this is ridiculous. This is completely ridiculous. And so when you're Tony Podesta, you are a massive, very, very powerful left-wing power broker. Of course, his brother John Podesta was instrumental on Hillary Clinton's campaign, Secretary Clinton's campaign in 2016, as well as being the chief of staff to President Bill Clinton all throughout the 90s. Go and listen to Tony Podesta describe his business in his own words.
I mean, I'm proud of what I do. I represent lots of organizations and businesses and countries, we work hard for our clients, and we present the views of our clients to policymakers in the executive branch or in the Congress, and they're generally happy to be better informed about the views of our clients. There's nothing wrong with that, I think.
So let's continue the story on. The filings indicate that Huawei spent $3.59 million in lobbying the United States in 2021, nearly 8 times as much as it did in 2020. Gosh, I can't think. Why would Huawei be spending 8 times more on Washington in 2021 than they did in 2020? Could something have changed in Washington, D.C. between 2020 and 2021 that would make the CCP want to be spending 8 times more money than they did? I can't think, and you guys, maybe in the comments, leave us a message. You can help me out a little bit. What could it be that would make the CCP spend that much more money in Washington from 2020 to 2020? I just can't put my finger on it. Folks, this is what we do here at Human Events Daily. We follow the money. And I've told you this before. Our elites, our power brokers, our leaders, they're bought and sold. That's why when you see things like this and you say, why aren't we pulling out of the CCP Olympics? Why are we going along with this thing? Why are we trying to fight for war in Ukraine? By the way, Ukraine, $50,000 a month, Hunter Biden. Understand, bought and sold. Our elites, their families. This isn't even elite capture anymore. This is elite merger that we're now seeing between the U.S. and the CCP. Well, that's it for us here at Human Events Daily. 4 action-packed segments delivering you your daily briefing. That's what you come here for every day. And remember our solemn motto, our oath, our vow to you. Be good, be brief, be gone. That's what we do here at Human Events Daily, day in, day out. Analysis and look-aheads. We are looking around the corner where the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, they're playing catch-up with us every single day. But before I leave you, it's time for today's moment of history. And this one, I actually really like this one. January 24th, 1972, Japanese soldier Soichi Yokoi was discovered on the island of Guam, U.S. territory, after he had spent 28 years hiding out in the jungle, not knowing that World War II had ended. They had to bring his commanding officer to order him to come out. Now that is loyalty. Ladies and gentlemen, you have my permission to lay ashore. Well, that's it for us here at Human Events Daily. Fortunately, we're doing the show from the free state of Tennessee right now, the city of Nashville, which is much, much better, much more preferred to Washington, D.C. But we're now turning it over to the free state of Arizona. Turning Point Live continues on the couch. Take it away, John.
Thanks, Jack. Well, hey, everyone. I'm your host, Jon Root. Welcome to TPUSA HQ in Phoenix, Arizona, and welcome to TPUSA Live. Here's the rundown for today's show. First, Isabel Brown's March for Life experience, cops under attack in NYC, and more in the daily briefing. Next, Kayleigh Kozak joins us to talk about her nonprofit that protects, helps, and empowers those affected by sexual and domestic abuse. Then we sit down with former TPUSA chapter vice president from Emerson College, whose chapter was shut down for calling out the CCP. Finally, America's education crisis with actress, author, and talk show host Sam Sorbo, followed by Defeat the Mandates March in one last thing. All right, let's roll. TPUSA Live from HQ starts now.
Authentic, unfiltered, grassroots content and conversation every weekday. Live from Phoenix, Arizona at the Turning Point USA headquarters, this is TPUSA Live.
Well, once again, welcome to TPUSA Live in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona at Turning Point USA headquarters. We got Isabel Brown. Welcome back from D.C.
I know, I'm in freedom again. It feels so good. I love it.
Yes. We're going to get her take and her experience about the March for Life event, which is fantastic. That was so fun. And then MAGA Hulk Stephen Davis. Another great t-shirt. Always.
I try.
On brand.
It's what I do, okay? It's
And
who he is.
Well done. And then no one rocks Fila's like you. I don't think I see anybody else rocking Fila's. I remember
Those are in again.
They
You know,
exactly.
You've really never seen people wearing those recently? These
not,
are in.
not recently. Are they coming back?
Yes.
I'm in, okay? Let me get that understood.
Also, trendsetter over here is my TPUSA contributor and guy who lifts weights. TPUSA contributor Jobob.
What's up?
How was the weekend?
Oh, the weekend was great. I followed some great advice. I took a kickboxing margarita class, which was pretty interesting. To have the margarita and practice kickboxing.
Fantastic.
I don't know why she said to do that, but she did, and that's what I did.
Was
Had
your
a great
favorite
time.
redhead there?
She, no, she wasn't. I think she had to take her dog to the dentist, so she had to cancel last second. But margarita kickboxing, it's a thing.
Who knew?
It's awesome.
My goodness.
It's not a real thing, by the way. That's the White House press secretary. Never mind.
Oh, no, go off.
Yeah.
Please tell us.
Oh,
Well, the White House press secretary got on The View and said, hey, if things are bothering you, you should just go take a kickboxing class or have a margarita. That's what you should do when inflation is ruining your savings and all that sort of stuff. But stop me, just do what we need to
It wouldn't be
do.
TPUSA Live on the couch without bringing up The View. It is absolutely bonkers. I feel like no one talks more about The View than TPUSA Live on the couch.
Maybe other than The View.
Yeah.
So there you go.
There's just so much great content.
Yeah,
Have
it
you ever
really
met
is.
a person that says, oh, I got to get home, I got to catch The View?
No. Literally
Not a
never.
thing.
Who watches that
Not a
show?
thing.
Doctor's office waiting room.
There we go.
So,
Exactly.
I don't think we'd be friends with those people. It's kind of like people that tell me, hey, John, you might look good in a man bun. I was like, you know what?
I
I could
have
also.
said that before.
I actually
Excuse
disagree.
me.
You know what I
think
could
that
also
was
say?
Same
Us
page,
never talking
Jobob.
again. All right. But Isabel, you were out there in D.C.
I
for the
was.
March for Life event with Alex Clark. Tell us a little bit more about that.
It was so much fun. This was really only my second experience going to a March for Life. I popped in when I lived there in 2020, the last time they had a big march, but I didn't go to the whole thing. And I'm really glad that I stayed this entire experience. We started around the Washington Monument, which is sort of in the middle of Washington, D.C., in the middle of the mall there, if you've ever been, and marched all the way up with 150,000 estimated people from all across the world to the Supreme Court. I know we have a video time lapse to show you guys. Maybe we can get it up on the screen showing you how many people were there. It was so overwhelming, but really powerful. So this is just...
Hey guys, it's Isabel Brown and Alex Clark. We are here in Washington, D.C. at the March for Life, joined by tens of thousands of other pro-life patriots, and we can't wait to see why everyone is marching. Autumn, tell us why you're marching today.
I am marching today because I believe in the very basic science that says life begins at conception, and I think as human beings we have an obligation to speak up when there are injustices in our world. And so I am willing to sacrifice the popularity, the cold weather, the backlash that we get on social media, because this is more important than anything that could come my way.
I'm marching for the 20% of my generation that's been lost to abortion.
I'm marching because women deserve better. Tens of thousands of people here standing up for life, and really just every walk of life from the United States. So it's so exciting to see people gather here in our nation's capital to stand for life.
Blast there in Washington, D.C. And this is really important, especially in 2022, because you may not be familiar with this, but we are currently seeing the greatest constitutional challenge to Roe v. Wade, which was the Supreme Court case that set the standard for legalized abortion nationwide in the United States, in our lifetime, since 1973. And in that period of time, more than 63 million babies have lost their lives at the hands of the abortion industry. This is genocide, plain and simple. And unfortunately, we rarely talk enough about this very important issue, but that could look very differently here in the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, well, definitely thank you for everything you're doing out there. It's a fantastic video. I think we need more leaders like you going out, sharing these stories, because they need to hear about it more.
Absolutely.
And then also, too, I know we're going to talk about the rising crime in New York. We'll catch you up on that tomorrow. And you got to tune in tomorrow because Jack Posobiec's going to join us to talk about the Russia-Ukraine situation. And obviously, he's one of those guys. He's got the sources. He's got the connections. He's going to tell you exactly what's going on. Coming up next, we got Kayleigh Kozak. We'll see you in a minute.
Good ranchers, straight from the American farm. 100% American meat, 100% of the time. Delivered straight to your door.
Wait, are those my Good Rancher steaks? I'll be taking these.
Claim your 10 free bistro fillets with your next order with promo code TPUSA Live at goodranchers.com.
Welcome back to TPUSA Live. We have a very special guest here with us. We got Kayleigh Kozak, and I'm also joined by Isabel Brown. I'm Jon Root, obviously, but we need to talk about your organization because you still matter. Can you tell us a little bit more of a background about that and how it got started?
Yeah, so first, I'm so happy and grateful to be here, so thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here.
So Because You Still Matter started after a recent experience that I had having to reface my abuser in court and learning that there are not a lot of things available for victims in their later trauma. And after I faced my abuser, I learned that if and when his probation went away, I wouldn't have any protection and no victim would. So I just had this line that kept coming up to me, I still matter. And I realized very quickly that I wanted to fight for victims and survivors of sexual and domestic abuse because you still matter. And that is what we do.
What's your long-term goal with your organization, and what sort of impact are you hoping to make on the community?
The long-term goal would be to fight for victims and survivors, to ultimately have justice and enhancement with the current laws that we have, and even creating new laws that better help protect and empower them. Right now, it just seems like the world is so focused on the perpetrator's rights, and they have all these resources available, but victims and survivors don't have anything when the later trauma rolls around. Everyone's there for the initial trauma and to help, But time, as we know, keeps going, and there's nothing available for victims later. And so I want to help fight for those enhancements and the things that will help them because they still matter. And it's not just a Arizona movement, it's a nationwide movement because victims and survivors across the nation matter. They don't just matter here in Arizona.
And then why do you think this has become a world of protecting the perpetrators than the victims? Because it seems like, especially in our Western worldview, we get so caught up in all this other stuff that's going on. Obviously, there's crisis after crisis here with this administration, but if we want to really talk about human rights, these are human rights issues here, and you're making sure people know about this and it's in the forefront of the news.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. So obviously, perpetrators are followed more closely, rightfully so, and then victims. And so they have all these things available for them, whether it's for accountability or, you know, them going through their treatment. And so there's all these things available, and then it's like victims can figure it out.
Yeah.
And there's all these government agencies available for perpetrators, like probation, right? They're there to hold accountable and to provide resources and things. But there's not a lot of that for victims. And so I think that because they're followed so closely and they do things like petition the courts to have their probation lifted, they're more in the court's face or the government's face, if you will, than victims. It's easier for victims to walk away than to keep being involved. And I will tell you, as I continue to go on this journey, I see why victims walk away. It's very draining and defeating. And I shouldn't have to be fighting for these things that are so common sense, but someone's got to do it. And every time I feel like giving up, I remind myself why I'm doing this, and it's because you still matter.
In the cultural moment that we're in, especially post Me Too era, I think many people are just unfamiliar with the reality that victims go through the legal process, because culturally there's so many eyes on what it means to be a victim of sexual abuse or domestic violence. What do you wish people in America knew more about the behind the scenes with the legal system where victims just aren't receiving the attention they deserve?
One of the biggest things is the lack of transparency that's available for victims. So for example, in my case, my parents accepted a plea deal because I was a minor and they didn't want to put me through a trial, and I'm so grateful for that. But at the time, they had told my parents that, you know, he dropped down to a level 1 sex offender, and level 1s aren't on the public registry, whereas they portrayed it to my parents as if, oh no, he will be a public, be on the public record, and it's not. Another thing is my parents accepted the plea deal with lifetime probation, and lifetime does not mean lifetime. Lifetime is essentially 7 to 14 years. And had they given my parents more transparency, they probably wouldn't have accepted those lifetime probation counts that he did. So I think that people need to be more aware of the how the system works and how they come down on their plea deals and things. And it goes along with everything I'm doing, really diving into the documents and reading what it means and being familiar with the terminology and the definitions.
And then why is there a redefinition of these words? Has lifetime always meant that specific term, or is lifetime the definition of that changed over the years?
So I haven't been told for sure if it has in fact changed, but from the people that I work with in this industry, lifetime did used to mean a true lifetime. It has somewhere along the line changed and become acceptable for it to come down to essentially 7 to 14 years. And so we have to, like even in my law, we had to be so specific with the terminology that not a lifetime of protection, a true and definite lifetime of protection lasting the defendant's natural life. Because if we had just left it at lifetime, there would have been a loophole available. And so it's just become, like a lot of things, an unacceptable definition, in my opinion.
Tell us more about your law and everything that's happening here in Arizona, and eventually where you want to see that grow.
Not a lot of people have a law named after them.
True.
So it's incredible.
I was so honored when Senator Kerr called me and said, "Hey, we're gonna proclaim this as Kayleigh's law." I was so honored. I'm like, we don't have to do that, and she said, "But we do," and I really am grateful. So Kayleigh's law provides victims and survivors the option to petition the court for that true and definite protection that lasts the defendant's natural life. And I had learned that, like I had mentioned before, if my abuser would have had his lifetime probation lifted, I wouldn't even be able to petition for protection. And why is this even a thing? Why as a victim do I have to come back and reface my abuser to ask for protection? How did we get to this point? And I just couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't the only victim facing this. And if this is what I'm going through, how many other hundreds of thousands of victims are in this situation and don't have the protection they deserve? So we put together a bill, like I said, that provides this protection for victims, and it passed through the Arizona House and Senate with complete bipartisan support in 4 months. And that just goes to show you how important this is. You know, they say every 68 seconds an American is sexually assaulted. That's, I mean, just think about the time we've been sitting here. I mean, it's, you know, the hour-long segment. That's approximately 60 people that have been sexually assaulted. And that's far too high, that number is. And so with that in my mind, it made it very easy to fight for victims for this law. But Arizona's not enough. And like I said, again, we have an entire nation to protect. Victims everywhere deserve this protection because they still matter.
And can you tell us about the levels too? Because you were talking about a level 1, is this 1 to 5? How does that work exactly? And how, if you needed to change that or wanted to change that, would you?
Absolutely. So there's actually a level 0, which I just learned, and I don't even really know what that means. So level 1, 2, and 3. So depending on the crime and whether they take a plea deal or they go to trial, they fall into a certain level category. A lot of, I would assume, attorneys, you know, advise their defendants to take a lesser, when you're taking a plea deal, you know, and they plea them down to level 1 because it's less rules, less regulations. They're not on the public registry. So like your next door neighbor could be a level 1 sex offender and you couldn't even look it up because they're not on there. And I just, a lot of, for example, public urination falls under level 1. And I don't know why that's in the same category as a teacher and soccer coach that sexually abused a 12-year-old child. But they plea down and they know what they're doing. And I want that accountability there. I don't think it should be crossed. I don't think that they should be in the same category.
No.
And so bringing awareness to that, you know, like the definition of lifetime, and just hoping that eventually we can get to the point where there's more transparency for victims and their families.
What sort of impact have you seen on the survivor community here in Arizona since the passage of your law?
It's been so humbling to have so many people reach out to me, and a lot of them didn't know that they didn't have this protection. They just assumed, it was this assumption that a victim has lifelong protection, and they don't. And just giving them that added layer, you know, that little bit, I guess, stronger peace of mind that they have from their perpetrator, and that they have this. And they're even just reaching out and just taking the time to introduce themselves or share a little bit of their story. I'm always so honored when they feel comfortable enough, because it's really hard to do. But that's what keeps me going. That's part of what keeps me going and fighting for this. And so every time I get those messages, it just really makes me feel good about this journey that I'm on.
Because as of right now, too, what do you think is the percentage of victims holding back sharing their story because they don't feel like the system is for them, or they don't feel comfortable enough maybe facing their abuser?
Do you know that they say about only 10% of victims come forward?
Wow.
To the law. And again, with what I've been through, I can see why. A lot of them aren't believed for whatever reason. A lot of people don't have the support. They're scared. I understand. But it's a crazy percentage for sure.
And then what's the difference between a place like Arizona and California? Like, are those laws just drastically different about how they go about that?
It's different everywhere. Again, down to definitions, terms, all those things. It's so different everywhere. Arizona, I am proud to say, is one of the stronger states when it comes to protecting victims and their rights. We do have...
Because of people like you.
Thank you. We do have a lot of things that I think should be modeled across the nation. From advocacy centers to laws to even some of our, our government-funded groups that we have appointed through the governor's office. And so I am proud of that. And we have a lot more, I guess, grit with like victims' attorneys here and things, and people wanting to go after the bad guys. So I am proud of that here in Arizona.
You are a mom, you mentioned. How many kids do you have?
5.
5 kids. Oh my gosh, you're
that's
a saint.
Basketball
we love
team.
That. What does this mean for you as a mom, knowing that the future is going to look different here in your state?
Oh my gosh, it's a lot. I mean, I have 4 daughters, and not to say sexual abuse happens to boys too, so that's not, I don't ever want to, put that down, but my oldest daughter is the same age I was when I started being abused. And so to look at her and think, it makes me so sad that I ever had to go through that. But to look at her and see, again, I'm fighting for her, you know, just her and every other 12-year-old, and she hasn't been through anything, but anybody who's been through abuse, and for future generations, and for them to see that we're fighting for something bigger than ourselves. It's been a really cool experience with them. And they only understand the surface level of it because they're too young. But they know that mom's out there fighting for people that have been abused, and they think it's so cool.
I love that.
But what can people do to help? Because everybody wants action items, and there's so many different organizations that people can give to, and there's a lot of those feel-good organizations. But when you get into the nitty-gritty of this, it's extremely uncomfortable for people to talk about. But just think about the discomfort we have for the victims right now.
Yeah.
So what can people do? What website can they go to? How can they help out financially or any other way?
So our organization is becauseyoustillmatter.org. And there's a lot of information on there about the law and, you know, ways you can get involved. And one of the number one ways I would encourage anybody, specifically in Arizona, is to just get involved within legislation in general. I mean, and just educate yourselves just in general. And we have something called an RTS. You can go look it up, a request to speak. Also, specifically to Kayleigh's law, I always ask, you know, obviously social media is a great thing, so share on there. But go tell 3 people that you know about this law, because I can promise you that one of those 3, if they haven't been directly impacted, they have been indirectly impacted, or they know someone who has. And the way this law is written, the victims have to petition the court. So if they don't know about this law, then they don't know about it. So I really want to encourage everyone to tell somebody about Kayleigh's law, you know, a coworker, a friend, a family member, and just be aware, educate yourself on sexual abuse and some of the signs and things that you can look for. Don't be naive.
Yeah.
It happens everywhere. So those are just some of the things.
Yeah.
What words of encouragement do you have for victims who maybe have yet to come forward, knowing that there is a support system for them out there, and for those hoping to make an impact in this movement to help more women and other people obviously exposed to sexual abuse and domestic violence in the future?
I think it's so important for victims and survivors to know they're not alone. They're not, and it's one of the loneliest places to be, and then you're dealing with, you know, court cases or scrutiny or family, you know, all those things, so you're not alone. And there are people that want to support you and help you. You just have to, find them. And like, again, it goes back to these perpetrators have so many things readily available to them, and victims almost have to work a little bit harder. But those resources are available, and there's hope that you don't have to stay in that box of being a victim. You are a survivor.
Yeah.
You survived what happened to you. Don't let that define who you are. Don't let the weight of what someone chose to do to you just be on you for the rest of your life. You can be set free from that and go on and just not have that weight anymore.
And then finally, before we let you go, definitely want to say thank you for everything you're doing for everyone out in Arizona. This is a great cause. Once again, can you tell people the website?
BecauseYouStillMatter.org.
BecauseYouStillMatter.org. Well, thank you so much for everything you do once again. And people can't play naive anymore. Make sure you have people in power. They're held accountable. Make sure they're taking action for you because they work for you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
We got a former VP of the TPUSA chapter coming up next.
What if I told you that this has all happened before? The riots, violence, church burning, attacks on police, destruction of private property.
My name is Sam Sorbo. I am a Holocaust survivor.
This is the reality of what happens when you have capitalism that goes to socialism.
El socialismo no funciona. El socialismo no funciona.
Can you take this off?
TPUSA Live is about to be spicy. I mean, would you expect anything less? It's me, Alex Clark. Of course it's gonna be spicy. Tune into The Spillover, my brand new podcast. Think of it like the older sister to POPlitics with a lot more conservative.
What's up, guys? My name is Jon Root, and every week I'm breaking down the top stories in sports and bringing you conversations you won't hear anywhere else. It's gonna be a great time here on Breaking. Hey everyone, welcome back to TPUSA Live. Jobob and MAGA Hulk Stephen Davis are back. Hello.
They're back.
He took all my pillows. I don't have any back support.
I mean, his back is a lot bigger than yours.
It's a lot of back.
More pillows.
Just saying.
Baby got back, okay? Understand it.
Okay.
You're probably the only guy I know, like everybody, it says like, my wife buys so many pillows.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably the only guy that's probably like, this is really good for me.
I am not complaining.
This is phenomenal.
So many throw pillows. Yes. Thank you so much.
Add more.
And we're going to talk about Emerson College. So obviously we have TPUSA chapters all across the nation, and we have so many courageous students that are leading the charge against cancel culture, all the culture wars. And when you start calling out the CCP, Emerson College is starting to take the side of the CCP.
I love this story. This is one of my favorite stories of adversity that our chapters have faced ever, maybe. And this started last academic year, if I believe. And we were sending out activism materials to all of our students nationwide, and we created these adorable stickers from the Among Us game, if you've ever played that, and it said China kinda sus. Hilarious. It's cute, it's relatable, it's obviously based in truth, and Emerson College had an absolute meltdown about these posters and stickers being on campus.
Sus is short for suspect for everybody else out there, right?
Yeah, okay.
All right, just in case you were wondering.
Boomer dictionary.
I had to tell everybody. I
John,
hope
you're
that
being a
everybody
little
knows.
sus right now.
What
Okay,
if there's
that's all
some? I guarantee you, my dad watching this right now is like, "What does sus mean?"
Well, Mr. Root, I am happy to explain that to you. But
Thanks
I
for
do
watching,
enjoy giving your son a hard time here on TPUSA Live. Anywho, so the school actually removed the recognized student organization status from the TPUSA chapter at Emerson College after these posters were put up all around campus, and now obviously it's just gotten even better every day.
Wonderful.
And you know what they did though is you had on September 30th in an email to all the students at Emerson College, the interim president, William Gilligan, condemned anti-Asian bigotry. And do you know KY Lynum? Do you know what her background is? She is a Chinese Singaporean.
Huh.
So you're saying that a Chinese woman is basically hating on Asian people?
Naturally.
Well, make it make sense.
From a man named William Gilligan. Yes, of course.
It makes sense
Send
if
him
you
to
follow
Gilligan's Island.
the left's logic. Because I remember when Nicole Hannah-Jones, this was after the whole, if you don't know whether you're voting for me or Trump, then you ain't black. Nicole Hannah-Jones, in a sense, deleted tweet, came out and said there's a difference between racially black and politically black. So that you can be you have dark skin like me, but unless you think politically, quote unquote black, if you don't think monolithically, quote unquote black, you're not truly black. So I wonder if they're using that same type of logic in this situation from Miss Nicole Hannah-Jones.
That's so disgusting.
It's
It's so demeaning.
Yeah, I'm curious, you specifically, does that make you angry, or is it funny at this point?
It's both.
Okay.
It's both.
Yeah.
Because it's angry because this is the thought process, the monolithic thought process that a lot of people think when it comes to black people, what other black people think, especially on the left, when it comes to us on the right. You're supposed to think a certain way. So if you don't, you're not really the color or the person. You ain't black. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but it's
Thanks,
also
Byron.
funny because it's like, that's really ridiculous.
It is.
And especially in a situation like this, she's not considered, I guess, it's the mental gymnastic they have to play to try to accuse her of something when I'm the very group that you're accusing me of. It's
Well,
ridiculous.
you remember when COVID hit too, everybody was like, I can't believe what you're saying about Chinese people.
Stop Asian hate, baby.
Wait,
Stop Asian
that's
hate.
not what I'm going to stop you right there, because nobody was saying that.
No.
Literally nobody was saying that.
the left
Nobody
was-
was saying, I hate Chinese people. No, we're
not a
talking
thing.
about the CCP and China letting the bat fever
Which
out
was
of their
exactly
country.
the point of this campaign that we were sending out to all of our students.
Yeah.
We were highlighting the fact that actual genocide is taking place in China
Literally.
with the Uyghur population. And this poor student of ours, she actually no longer attends Emerson College. She had to leave because of the threats and backlash and everything she was experiencing. But now there's a group.
The Asian hate that she was experiencing?
Yes, the literal Asian hate.
Right.
Stop Asian hate, Boston. All right, anywho. So the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education, FIRE, they're a phenomenal group. They're a fire group, so to speak, if you will. Very punny. They have
Should I tell the viewers what that means? That means it's legitimate or legit, as the kids would say.
But they have launched this ad campaign now that I think is hysterical in reference to everything that this chapter has been through, where they're actually driving around these mobile electronic billboards that say Emerson kinda sus all around the campus in Boston.
They spelled sucks wrong, but that's okay.
Fair.
Well, that's another example. Is there's organizations that can fight for you. Obviously, we're doing everything we can. Turning Point USA taking care of our own. Absolutely. But you team up with FIRE. They're going to try whatever they can do to get that chapter up and running again, get KJ back in school, and then get people to open their eyes to why is the CCP getting coddled on campuses in America?
Well, my question is, what does China have to do in order to be looked at as a bad actor in the global stage? Like, so obviously there's everything that happened to COVID. But last week, when we were there talking about the Olympics, remember, they have one case of Omicron in Beijing. Get out of here with that crap. And then they said it came from a package coming from Canada. So all I'm saying is China is still lying and nobody seems to care, especially your super woke universities that say, whoa, we have to protect China's integrity. Like, get out of here with that.
And there's now whistleblowers coming forward saying that there's allegedly a new variant coming out of China that has Ebola-like symptoms.
Oh boy.
Oh dang, never mind.
So we will see.
Nope.
We will see.
Nope, don't want that.
China kind of sus.
But yeah, I mean, it's true because there's even athletic delegations right now from the UK, America, and a few other places around the world. I think Japan's one of them too. They're telling their athletes, please do not bring your personal mobile device because of the spying problem from the CCP. They're telling them to buy burner phones.
Yeah.
The CCP is sus.
Yeah.
They're more than sus. They're disgusting.
Yeah.
Dude.
And this is crimes against humanity that we're seeing. And then they get to host the Olympics.
Yeah.
They get protected on our campuses here in America. What are we doing?
It's a great question. What are we doing? It's on campus. It's in the NBA. I mean, it's literally everywhere in our culture that we're all just bowing down to the CCP.
Yeah. No one wants to speak up. No one wants to speak out.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then even now with this situation here, I know we're going to talk to Jack tomorrow about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a crisis going on there.
Yeah.
We want to take care of that border crisis, but we don't want to take care of this border crisis and the southern border. But it also means that China might feel more empowered to go attack Taiwan. So like we're constantly forgetting about that. And then China, what's going to happen there? Is anybody try to hold them accountable? They're already killing people. They got slave labor camps.
Well, I don't think we'll go after them for that because we're benefiting from that. Those camps are directly contributing to our economy, be it Disney movies or NBA merchandise. So I doubt we ever do anything about that.
How conspiracy theory am I allowed to get here?
Bring it on.
If I were China, China,
put them on there.
Yep,
Put them on.
Got it on. I'm ready.
Go.
If I were China, right, and I wanted to take Taiwan, which they've been very clear that they want to take Taiwan.
You're way different than what I thought China would be if I looked at China.
I'm sorry, are you assuming?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
If I were China and I wanted to take Taiwan, guess what I have when I have the Olympics? I have hostages from every single country. And if they're not bringing their cell phones and using mobile burners, who's to say that China won't move on Taiwan in the next 2 weeks because they have this Olympic Games in their country?
Not to mention, everyone's conveniently in one city. So, oh no, what if a new variant would happen to sweep through and
they can spread it to the
infect
world.
everyone?
Also, we're talking about a diplomatic boycott. So normally when you have
that's good. The governor won't be there.
Yeah, it's just like no one's going to remember years from now. But what happens if, heaven forbid, things go haywire and you don't have people there from your government to help protect you and speak for you? They're not even there.
Yeah,
they don't care.
So I am terrified for our athletes, and I'm terrified for our students on campuses here across the country. Where you bring up anything about the CCP, you are just getting shut off.
Right through jail, right away.
But I mean, it comes from the top down. Just look at the administration. Look at the way they've treated this whole situation. They lied about COVID. They have genocide, slave labor camps, everything that's going on, they've been coddled and they've been able to get away with this. But if you want to hear more about this story, professorwatchlist.org. And I know you wrote an article on the live feed about China kind of says, especially right when this came out. But in general, like, we need to keep them accountable.
We do.
And that's what we're going to do on the show. We're constantly going to talk about what's going on here. And once again, I hope our athletes are okay.
Yeah,
because the Olympics are coming up in just about a week. And also shouldn't even be there. They have to make their own snow. This is ridiculous. Sam Sorbo coming up next.
Hey everybody, how you doing? My name is Osiga Kaku. I'm from the great state of North Carolina, and I'll see you at freedomsquare.com.
My name is Preston Para, and we'll see you at freedomsquare.com.
Hi, I'm Kyle Clare from Bolingbrook, Illinois, and I will see you at freedomsquare.com.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie. I'm from Fayetteville, Arkansas, and we'll see you at freedomsquare.com.
Hi, I'm Johnny Richardson. I'm from Prescott, Arizona, and I'll see you at freedomsquare.com.
I'm Rachel. I'm from Dallas, Texas, and you'll see me at freedomsquare.com.
I'm Soraya. I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and I will see you at freedomsquare.com.
My name is Michelle DeGroot from Los Angeles, California, and I'll see you at freedomsquare.com.
Hi, my name is Emma Faye Redcan, and I'm from San Antonio, Texas. I will see you at freedomsquare.com.
Join us in the fight for freedom. Welcome to Freedom Square.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TPUSA Live. I'm here with Isabel Brown. We're about to be joined by actress, author, talk show host for the Epic Times, also the host of the Sam Sorbo Show, good friend of Turning Point USA, Sam Sorbo. Welcome to TPUSA Live.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, first and foremost, obviously you have a great family, a family that people probably just want to look like. you got a great husband that's done a lot of great work in Hollywood, and then your son, I know, has even been on the show.
Yes, we love him so much.
TPUSA
Me
ambassador.
too.
But tell us a little bit more about, why you feel like people look to you as a mother and you guys as a family.
Oh, that's such an interesting question. Well, that's making a huge assumption. All I know is I'm an education freedom advocate, and so when they see that I successfully homeschooled my kids, they want a little bit of whatever that is, I suppose. And so, and I'm very willing to share it because I feel like I've just discovered, the secret sauce, if you will. I've figured it out. And, our education system has done a huge number on us and really has damaged us to a great degree, I would say. So I'm trying to liberate parents from the shackles of our education system, and in the process, liberate their children too.
Tell us more about what you've learned in terms of the indoctrination really impacting your kids and then now what's happening all across the country with students K through 12, public, private, charter schools. This is not immune to them. It's not just on college campuses anymore, but affecting the entire education system in America.
Well, yeah, I mean, to begin with, our education system is a socialist system. So I'm not sure how they hope to successfully educate people in the tenets of democracy and constitutional republic, which is what we have, in a fundamentally socialist system. And in fact, they don't. And that's why we see socialists graduating college. They're socialists before they even get to college, by and large. And it's just at college, maybe in the past few decades, that they've been able to express those sentiments. And the reason for that is because in our nation, we are a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But unfortunately, the government is now engaged in the process of educating the citizens, and the government doesn't have any interest in teaching us that we have the power, and the power resides with the people. And so it's just a huge conflict of interests. And the government should never be involved in the education of the citizens of this nation. Now, if you go to China, it makes perfect sense But we're not China, not yet anyway.
It seems like right now too, like I've talked about this for a long time. There's so much stuff that we should be learning in the education system. Like, let's talk about credit. Let's talk about buying a home, buying a car, all these real life skills that we're not learning. And it seems like basically our education system is making people dependent on government and not making people independent. So what do you think we could change here? Because it seems like it's working for the government's favor, the way they have it set up.
Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. And the only trouble that we have is in actually identifying that, admitting it, and then acting upon that information. That is crucial information, but we've been basically disabled from acting upon it because we've been taught that education it looks like what the government is doing. And I've proven on my TV show and by the way, my TV show is specifically focused on education. It's called Schools Out with Sam Sorbo. And it delves into the principles of education. And on my podcast and in my books, and I dive into that paradigm. The entire paradigm is wrong. For instance, the first thing you learn in school, in order to ask the teacher a question, is that you have to raise your hand. This is in itself, this is a lesson. And the ultimate lesson that you learn there is don't question. And that, of course, is what we're seeing play out here now in the whole culture, is we have a culture of people who unquestioningly follow the expert, trust the expert, don't question. Also, failure is very bad in school. Don't fail. Well, what does that actually mean? It translates into don't try. And so now we have generations of people who don't question, don't try, and don't think, because the last thing you're supposed to do is actually put your own thought into things. What you're supposed to do in school is trust the teacher and regurgitate whatever the teacher tells you on the test. And that's why people get so frustrated with education when they're done in high school. They're like, ugh, I hope I never have to crack another book again. But they go to college. Why? Because they've been brainwashed by the system that they have to go to college. What do you think college prep and career readiness is? It's that you have to go to college. And we know that a large majority or a large portion of our students probably don't need college, probably shouldn't have to go to college. I mean, the entire system is geared, in a sense, against the young person, and in order to keep them infantilized so that they transfer their dependency on their parents into dependency on the government. And that's why I say it's a huge conflict of interest that the government is even involved in our education system.
That reality of dependence and thinking in lockstep and therefore acting in lockstep, I think has never been more apparent to the American people than right now in the time of COVID-19. And we're really seeing that in the education system as well, with children, not to mention college students, facing vaccine mandates and booster mandates, going to school online, or even having to wear a mask all day, let alone the stories of students having to sit outside in the cold to eat their lunch, or not having recess and no longer experiencing that social element that is so crucial to child development. Why do you think we got to this place, and do you think education in the more traditional sense of going to school is beyond saving now that we've implemented this very strange change in culture?
I don't know where you got the idea that I think it's beyond saving, except that we can't save it.
Amen, we agree.
Here's the problem. The whole paradigm is wrong. The fact that I have to raise my hand to ask the teacher a question is wrong. Children are innately curious. They should be engaged in their curiosity to discover what they need to know, right? The school paradigm is you got to have your 3 R's, right? Never mind that that's a lie, because they aren't R's. Writing starts with a W and arithmetic starts with an A. It's not 3 R's. And by the way, that's not education. Those are the tools of learning. But what they've done is they've made education so hard. The teacher knows everything. I mean, they've set up this barrier so that we don't want to learn anymore when we're in school, and we resent it. And we think that learning is hard. Learning's not hard. Learning should be enjoyable, but we've taken all the joy out of it. So I'm not sure if there's any way really to save it. I think that the paradigm is flawed. I think that removing children from their parents is a flawed idea. Especially as young, and now they're going to preschool. And I think that what we're seeing happening in the schools now with the masking and the vaccinating against the parents' wishes, forced abortions, not forced abortions, that's China still, but giving access to all kinds of sexual material that should not be in the classrooms. They're usurping all of the roles of the parent. They're not doing a good job of it. If they were effectively replacing the parents with good things, we would be okay with it. But clearly it's detrimental to the children.
And they're not even hiding it either. They're actually saying parents shouldn't have a role in raising their children, and it should be the schools.
They're sicking the FBI on them.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
That's right. And so now we know that. And what I struggle with is the parents who see that, they know that it's wrong, and they're still paralyzed, and they basically refuse to act. Or, God bless them, the parents that go to the school board and say, hey, don't be doing that. You need to change things. I got news for you. If they're willing to do it in the first place, you can't teach them. You can't correct them into not doing it. If they want to damage your children, they will find a way. And this is just, it's more blatant now, but it's been going on for a long time. That's why we are where we are. You think that going into the school boards and fixing this one thing, CRT or 1619 or the sex in the schools, the pornography or the bathrooms or what have you, you think that fixing that might actually remedy the situation? No, it's a Band-Aid on a ruptured spleen.
Wow.
And then from here, what do you tell people then? Where say, because there's a lot of really courageous parents that have decided to step up, and it's hurt them, you know, in their career, it's hurt them in their standing in their community. So what's the next step then? Obviously, you need to get those people out of power. I know we've gone to a few school board meetings out here in the Scottsdale Unified School District, stuff that they've tried to dox parents and everything. What do you tell people, and what are the action items in order to make a difference? Because people are talking about homeschooling, but not everybody can homeschool. So what do you tell people, especially since there's so many different avenues that they can go down for schooling?
Well, first of all, so I understand that the old adage is not everybody can homeschool, but homeschooling isn't home and it's not school. I call it self-teaching, so it's a completely different paradigm. The reason that we think that we can't homeschool is because we're trying to take the paradigm of education that the government has concocted and apply it at home, and that's the wrong approach, because if we are willing to admit that what they're doing is wrong, then we shouldn't be trying to replicate it at home. But the second thing is, yes, go to the school board, replace the school board, do all of that, but save your children first. Take your children out of school. Do not make your children fight on the front line while you're sort of bringing up the rear and you know, with the cannons or what have you. The kids have to get out of that damaging situation first and foremost, and then yeah, absolutely, you know, recall your whole school board. I think I don't know, different states have different ways of doing this, but I heard of one county, they were just going to recall the entire school board. They were just going to get it done, take them all out, replace them. The problem is that the whole paradigm is skewed because it deters education rather than encouraging it.
The world we're living in right now seems to be putting children on the front line, as you said, when it comes to every cultural battle, and kids have never really been under attack the same way that they are now. Myself and Jon are in the phase of life where eventually we would like to start a new family. We're not quite there yet, but these are the thoughts that keep me up at night when I think about the next chapter of my life. And I know so many young parents and other young adults are facing these same questions. What advice do you have for new families who may just be starting out in this journey of parenting to always put their children first and protect them in this world that's always changing?
Well, obviously have children, have lots of them as soon as possible. They're the greatest gift. They will teach you, if you allow them, your children will teach you incredible things. And so I just encourage that because it's just the most amazing journey. And really, you just have to prioritize. What's happened is we don't even learn discernment in school. We don't even learn how to make decisions in school because school they spoon feed you everything that you're supposed to know. And again, that's the wrong paradigm. So I would just encourage the young parents today, take your kids out of school and go on a path of discovery because you can get this done. And you can do it with your children, and you can have a relationship with your children that defies the norm. Because the norm is, oh, kids, they roll their eyes about their parents, and parents roll their eyes about their kids. You can't do anything with them. Teenagers, what are you going to do? And I will tell you that I do not have that relationship with my teens. I have an amazing relationship with my nearly adult teenagers. And you can have that too. And you just have to cast a vision and then take the steps that you need to take in order to get there.
And then finally, with about 1:30 left, how has faith played a role in your process of trying to stand up for kids and change the education system?
Well, I said before that they think that education is the 3 R's, and it's not. Education is the 3 F's, and that's faith, family, and freedom. Faith is really your worldview. It's how you perceive the world and how you allow the world to affect you. And so my faith informs everything that I do. And by the way, the secular humanists' faith informs everything that they do. So they believe that the survival of the fittest is the law of the land, and you see bullying on the rise, because that's what that is. Family is your relationship in your family unit, and then you translate that relationship out into the world. So faith is really your relationship with the world. And freedom, we know that education means freedom. So, you know, truth sets people free, right? So
Amen.
That should be the focus of the education that you provide for your children. And you should not be the teacher. You should be the lead learner and just the guide for them, because they will be self-taught.
And then finally, right before we let you go, where can people find Schools Out?
Oh, Schools Out with Sam Sorbo is on Epic TV. And for any other information for my books or anything else, my videos, podcasts, go to samsorbo.com.
Sam, well, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you for everything you're doing to make sure kids are taken care of and that parents are a little bit more empowered to fight back for them. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
We'll be back for one last thing.
You have to ask the question, how is the most heavily funded tribe have the poorest population?
Listen to me. My country is very because everything problem here. Don't have petroleum for bus and Cuban, for car, for life, for nothing.
And it sucks. Socialism sucks. There's no other way you can describe it.
Do you like guns? Do you like ammo? Do you like suppressors? Do you like freedom? Do you love America? Do you like baseball? Do you like rifles? Do you like 9mm? Do you like pistols? Join me, Paige Rue, every week on Reloaded.
Good ranchers, straight from the American farm. 100% American meat, 100% of the time. Delivered straight to your door.
Wait, are those my Good Rancher steaks? I'll be taking these.
Claim your 10 free bistro fillets with your next order with promo code TPUSA Live at goodranchers.com.
This is your brain. This is your brain on socialism. Any questions?
Welcome back to TPUSA Live. If only you could hear what we talk about during the commercial break. My goodness.
When I'm with the boys, it just always gets so fun.
I feel like people at home should know that Steven and I sit here in utter silence when you guys are doing those interviews.
Yeah.
Right here on this couch. We don't go anywhere. We sit right here.
And then once we go full screen with an interview and Jobob tries saying something, you shut your mouth.
Yeah, that's it.
You keep it down.
He's very aggressive.
We got MAGA Hulk, Stephen Davis, Jobob, Isabel Brown. I'm Jon Root. We got time for one last thing. Defeat the mandates protest that was in Washington, D.C. That was right after
I
the
was
March for Life.
getting on a plane, like taking off as it was commencing with the Lincoln Memorial, so I did not attend, but I saw some great photos from it. People seem to be really excited.
Yeah, thousands of people showed up too, and then I know we're gonna show some photos and videos of this as well. So there's right by the Lincoln Memorial, and obviously there's people like Dr. Robert Malone. You've heard about him. He's an absolute rock star.
I'm just a nerd, but I think he's awesome. Like, I would love to shake his hand. That would
Anything
be a really
science
great
is
day.
like, wow. Incredible.
Remember, who was the MSNBC host that said she was a Fauci groupie?
I am not a
Wallace,
groupie of
somebody,
Dr.
I'm not sure who it was.
Somebody said it. I don't remember who.
That's what you are to Dr. Malone.
Yeah,
right?
pretty much. But he's like a legit scientist who like
for the real deal.
invented all these amazing feats of modern medicine. He's a really cool guy. So.
And I think it's pretty spectacular to see people come together for this because people they've had enough. And this isn't just a bunch of people on the right.
No,
these are people that like you have healthcare workers that are just like, why did I get let go for not getting the vaccine? But now they're bringing sick doctors back, and I'm losing my livelihood, and I'm going through hell in a handbasket here. There's people with a lot of great signs out there. I call the shots, not you. My body, my choice.
I saw some that said like vaccinated liberal for medical choice, which was really cool. So you saw a lot of people from all walks of life show up, understanding this is not about COVID. Okay, this is about your ability to make your own decision with your own body and move forward accordingly from that.
And it's still fascinating to me that there's people that will defend mandates.
Oh my gosh,
It's unbelievable. That's why I think this whole idea of mass formation psychosis, people have just been brainwashed to think that the government's going to take care of you. But look there's thousands of people there that say enough's enough. And it should not matter how I vote, where I come from. This should not be a part of my America.
Well, the media has been trying to make it seem like those who have been standing against these mandates are few and far between, and that it's just this fringe element of America. No, there's people left and right and center that are standing together in solidarity, especially when it comes to freedom, the essence of freedom, medical freedom, and saying, look, my body, my choice, right? And at the end of the day, that's what it's really about. I mean, the freedom of America and be able to, as an American, to make whatever decision I want to do for my own body and not be forced to do so to participate in society. I think it's absolutely
especially
important.
as the science keeps changing every 5 minutes. Now, the CDC in the last week or so came forward and said, oh yeah, remember when we made you wear t-shirts over your face? That actually didn't work. Psych. Also, meanwhile, during Delta variant, your natural immunity, that evil word that would have gotten you kicked off everything in the last 6 months, that was 6 times more effective than the vaccine against the Delta variant. So science, am I right? Mandates, am I right? And so it's just crazy to me that there are still these people, I don't know if you guys saw the clip of the mass formation psychosis Karen at this rally screaming at everyone.
Yeah,
that was viral on social media. This woman would defend these mandates until the day her breath gives out. And I'm like, really? Even now?
People still, they don't want to hear the truth. At all.
No, they don't.
So they really do believe if people aren't wearing masks, still that they're killing grandma, they're killing people, and then if you don't get the vaccine, you're killing people. It's just it's so crazy the amount of grandmothers that I have. It is unbelievable.
This guy's insane.
Yeah.
You have to step over a pile of dead grandmothers just to get to John's desk.
Man, that's yikes.
We speak from
That might have been the worst joke I've ever made here.
But honestly, people just still believe this, and it's crazy. They've been brainwashed into this, and it's just ruined friendships, it's ruined families, it's ruined this entire country.
I feel like the best way to attack it is just make fun of it at this point. Like,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
like why doesn't TPUSA have
Absolutely.
a shirt that says "Science"? Am I right? I don't know. I wear that everywhere.
Genius.
That's great.
Well, it probably
I
should just be
love
like Robert Malone, just
Yes.
Joe Rogan.
yes.
A bunch of people probably look at that and go, I don't know who those people are because I don't take in those sorts of media outlets.
Probably.
I only watch CNN.
I
I'm one
only
of the
follow
5.
Dr.
Yes.
Fauci. All hail
That's
the
it. NPC, the whole lot.
There's no way that guy's a virologist. There's no way he came up with the mRNA vaccine. No chance. Don't listen to him.
Did you guys see?
Real quick.
Did you guys see the pictures of Dr. Fauci's office that the New York Post posted last
No.
week?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Here's a photo of
Fauci
himself.
in his office with a photo of Dr.
himself.
Fauci
Of
and a
himself.
Fauci bobblehead on the desk.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not surprised. Are you?
No, he's not
He
narcissistic at
probably
all.
has like PJs. You know how they can make those custom PJs
With the face
their
of his own-
of his own face. I'm not surprised.
Good Lord. But also, too, the police reported no arrests and no significant incidents at all.
Woohoo.
That's what you call a peaceful protest. Coming up next, we got Freedom Papers with Morgan Zegers. Sits down with the producer of the Charlie Kirk Show, Connor Clegg. See you tomorrow.
Welcome to our first ever political correctness and inclusivity training. First off, safety. Just want to make sure that everyone here is jabbed, right? Just kidding, none of my business. So I'm Dylan, I'm your HR rep. A little bit about me. I'm a white man, and I'm so sorry if that makes any of you uncomfortable. On to the first order of business today. We're going to be talking about diversity. And Josh, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Donde está la biblioteca? I'm from Colorado. I learned that from Dora.
Okay, second order of business. This is a mental health friendly workplace. Yes, Alex.
If we're really a mental health friendly workplace, what are we doing about the suicide rate of the birds? Because I saw 2 dead birds in the parking lot yesterday.
Alex, shut up.
Yeah, there's been a really big disregard for the bird lives ever since people in the office started sharing the birds are not real meme. Birds are definitely real. The government's putting chips in their brain, which is making them self-destruct and kill themselves, and we have to be talking about the real issues, or what are we doing here at all? Bird lives matter.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
That's what BLM stands for. That's not what it stands for.
She brings this up every time.
Why is Mitchell and Pope
Because I feel like they don't
I think this went really well. All in all, this is a great place to work, and we're becoming more politically correct every single day.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Freedom Papers, powered by Turning Point USA and hosted by moi, your favorite little history nerd, Morgan Zegers. I love being here at the Turning Point USA studio, but I love it even more when Connor Clegg
I'm
is
here.
with me. Hi.
It's great to be here.
Thanks for being back.
Of course.
I love
Anytime.
it. Connor's so busy right now, but he still loves to join and converse with us on the lovely Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, so thank you, Connor.
Of course, they're so important.
But Connor, I've been really excited that you're going to come on for this because apparently this is one of your favorite papers.
It's
number
one of my
14.
favorites. It's one of my favorites. I get really fired up about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like, okay, let's keep you there for a moment and then we'll let you go off. But I had one quote that I want to read out. First of all, I kind of want to read it out to give you a good platform to pounce off of. But I also want you guys to get an understanding of this paper. Now, this one's by Madison. This one is by Madison. Let me confirm. Yes. Sometime, I've got a little grandma brain sometimes. This one's by Madison. This bust is of James Madison. Did you see they gifted me this?
I did. It's a
How
beautiful
sweet
bust.
is that? They gave us the flag in the background for the set and the guys behind the camera, the whole production team. They gave us a surprise James Madison bust. So if you're watching the video version, you can see that. So this one is written by the good old bust man right there. And it's titled, I'm getting all crazy with my pages, it's titled Objections to the Proposed Constitution from Extent of Territory Answered. Number 14 by Madison. Now, I want to read the quote. It's kind of in the middle of the paper, Connor.
Mm-hmm.
It says, Hearken not to the unnatural voice which tells you that the people of America, knit together as they are by so many cords of affection, can no longer live together as members of the same family, can no longer continue the mutual guardians of their mutual happiness, can no longer be fellow citizens of one great, respectable, and flourishing empire. Hearken not to the voice which petulantly tells you that the form of government recommended for your adoption is a novelty in the political world, that it has never yet had a place in the theories of the wildest projectors, that it rashly attempts what is impossible to accomplish. No, my countrymen, shut your ears against this unhallowed language. Shut your hearts against the poison which it conveys, the kindred blood which flows in the veins of American citizens, the mingled blood which they have shed in defense of their sacred rights. Consecrate their union and excite horror at the idea of their becoming aliens, rivals, enemies. And if novelties are to be shunned, believe me, the most alarming of all novelties, the most wild of all projects, the most rash of all attempts, is that of rending us in pieces in order to preserve our liberties and promote our happiness. Whoa.
Wow.
Wasn't that great?
It's beautiful.
So I read that kind of stuff and I'm like, ooh, Connor's going to love that. But what do you think? So why is this your favorite paper, Connor? And do you want to maybe summarize for us what you took out of the paper and what we're about to talk about?
Well, I think a lot of the paper has concerns with size, and those are important, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I love it because it's an impassioned defense of one of the things that makes America absolutely exceptional, and that's the fact that we are a republic and not a democracy, right? A democracy, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of history as it exists, is one of the most dangerous things to ever be created on the face of this earth, right? If left unchecked. And the most wise thing that the founders ever did was to avert the crisis that comes from making America such an exceptional land, such a beautiful place, from making America a democracy, right? And that's what gets me fired up about it. I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot of nuances to it. There's a lot of exciting things in there, and there's a lot of beautiful language. But at the core of it, it's about making sure that we know we're called to something greater and larger than ourselves. And a republic encapsulates all of that so beautifully and so efficiently. And a democracy so often delves into chaos. And so glad we're here. Let's unpack it.
Yeah, I mean, let's get right into it. We're going to read out a few of the sections because this is definitely one of those papers. We want to reference what Publius is saying because Publius looks back to the previous attempts, specifically with democracy, specifically with countries of similar size to what we were when we were the original 13 colonies, the original 13 states, and then started adding slowly but surely. Because keep in mind, you guys, the size of the country was pretty much just what was Mississippi River over to the East Coast.
Right.
The Louisiana Purchase, which doubled the size of the country, did not happen until 1803. And so this was in 1787, this paper, and we're a little bit away from growing to that size. But at the same time, we knew that there was so much land that was out there, and we knew that we had a calling to potentially grow as a country. Like you said, we were serving a greater purpose, and our founders understood that, so they wanted to build something that was going to be able to adjust to potential growth in the size of the country, the size of the republic. It's the republic that would allow this kind of growth to happen. The democracy would not really allow that, and that's what they reference with history. So what Publius starts by saying in the paper is that we have seen the necessity of the Union as a bulwark against foreign danger, as the conservator of peace among ourselves, as the guardian of our commerce and other common interests, as the only substitute for those military establishments which have subverted liberties of the old world, and as the proper antidote for the diseases of faction which have proved fatal to other popular governments, and of which alarming symptoms have been betrayed by our own. All that remains within this branch of our inquiries is to take notice of an objection that may be drawn from the great extent of our country which the Union embraces. Now, here's where we get into this difference, Connor, between a republic and a democracy. Publius starts by explaining the problem with not understanding the differences here. He says, the error which limits Republican government to a narrow district has been unfolded and refuted in preceding papers. I remark here only that it seems to owe its rise and prevalence chiefly to the confounding of a republic with a democracy, and applying to the former reasonings drawn from the nature of the latter. The true distinction between these forms was also adverted to on a former occasion. It is that in a democracy, the people meet and exercise the government in person. In a republic, they assemble and administer it by their representatives and agents. A democracy, consequently, must be confined to a small spot. A republic must be extended over a large region. Now, what does that mean, Connor? I think I can explain that quickly. It means like if we were in a democracy, for everything that had to be decided, you and I and everybody listening, everybody watching would have to show up to vote to make the decisions for everything happening in government. But in a republic, what we do is all of the people show up on election day. We elect somebody who is going to then represent us in a smaller room of people, of representatives that represent the whole population, who will then make decisions on our behalf. And I remember like this is a good lesson from AP US history or something like that. My teacher back then in high school had said something of, there's politicians that will say, I am going to represent the people and whatever they want. And so they'll pay attention to the polls of the district. They'll pay attention to what the people want in every issue. And they'll see if, the district wants this, I'll vote this way. Right. But then there's other politicians that have the mindset of, I am going to ask for your vote, and in exchange for your vote, when I'm in office, you're going to trust me to make the right decision on your behalf. So people can see this idea of representative Republican-style leadership in different ways, but I think as long as politicians are transparent with us, that's all that matters. If a politician's going to tell me that they want to vote based on what the district wants, then it's like, okay, I know that that's what he's going to probably do and focus his leadership around. And if he doesn't plan on doing that and then he flips, that's what I have a problem with that.
Right. Well, and America's a patchwork of all these smaller places and districts and communities and towns, right? So whenever you send someone to Washington, the expectation is that they're going to be an enlightened individual who has not only the best interests of the community that they represent, he or she, but also the nation at large. Because we know that if chaos ensues in Phoenix, Arizona, and the fifth largest city in America, goes to all bloody hell because, let's say, that's what the people of Phoenix want, we have this thing called a republic, which is a bulwark against that. So the people that we send to Washington, we have to trust that they're going to take the best interests to heart of the community that they represent, but they also have to think in larger terms. They also have to think about the fact that we are an interwoven web of connectivity, and I'm starting to wonder if we're losing sight of both of those things, which is really dangerous, right, with the people that we send to Washington, right?
Interesting. Yeah, tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, we're seeing folks who, on one hand, couldn't care less about America. Like, I think a lot of the people that we send to D.C., they hate America, right? And that means that they hate Americans too, right? And then we also see people who are too fixated on hyper-local issues that they're willing to push through things that are bad for America, right? That's called pork barrel spending and all these things, right? So
we are so similar. It's fascinating.
Really? I'll be damned.
We should, sit together and talk on a podcast.
Well, let's do that. It's almost like we do that sometimes, right? But yeah, so someone will pass a $9 trillion infrastructure bill because it allots for a bridge in Iowa or something, right? Well, we know that bill it's fundamentally bad for the Republic, but because it's good for the people of that community, they're going to vote for it. So inherent in that, we see the dangers of democracy, and we also see the dangers of self-interest, which is the fundamental danger of democracy, right? Because whenever you get enough self-interested people together and you band them together and you influence them through propaganda and media and all these things, then they get to exert influence over everybody, right? So the pork barrel thing is just one example of how democracy at a local level, extrapolated to the national level, can create absolute bedlam and lead to the death of the republic. So I hope that's not too dark.
No,
but
we have to talk about that stuff because that's really where things get chaotic. I mean, I don't know how many. I feel like you probably know some Congress people too. I've had some private conversations with a lot of them, and their justification is, oh well, I exchanged my vote on this for this vote for this because I had to serve my district with funding for a bridge or for something smaller like that, and I'm more of a pure Republican Federalist kind of person where I would like to see anything that needs to be funded at a local level only be funded by the local level and potentially state level. But I don't think every locality and state should be so dependent on the federal government the way that it is now. And I think I've talked about this with you before. We had Paul Gosar on the podcast. Love Paul. And he's a congressman here in Arizona, and he's such a hard worker, and I really respect him. The left goes after him because they know that he is a hard worker, a workhorse. And his explanation for a lot of this kind of stuff, a lot of the pork, a lot of the growth, is that Congress has given up their spending power and decision-making power to the executive branch of the government, which our founders had never intended. And what the legislators do is they hand over via some large package bill funding and decision-making power to the executive branch bureaucracy to say, here you go, you can divvy up the funds, you can pass these on to localities, all the things that you want to do. And it's so far away from what was originally intended. That's what really hurts. It almost seems too big to fix, but then Paul Gosar says, no, if we get enough people that understand these issues, that's how you really change things over generations. You get more people to understand how bad this whole process really has become.
Yeah, and it's always striking to me whenever we hear about what's going through Congress right now, which is the Build Back Better, right?
Yeah.
It's President Joe Biden's Build Back Better plan, right? Well, okay, it's a legislative debate. Why are we not having, a legislative lead into all of these things, right? Back in the day when America used to work a little bit more efficiently and effectively for the people, there were bills that were pushed through the Congress that were, championed, and they go down in history as being the product of a certain legislator, a senator, a congressman, et cetera. Now, all of a sudden, we always see, pieces of massive landmark legislation that belong wholly to the executive branch. And the people that we send to Washington, D.C. to work in Congress for us, they stop working for the people and they start working for the executive. So it's like they're just a workhorse for President Biden or President Trump or whoever.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous on either side whenever we're talking about small or big R and big D, right?
Exactly.
The legislature has to reclaim the rightful role that they were given by the founders to actually work for the people and do it in a prudent manner and balance the interests of localities and of the republic at large. Going back to the size issue, for the idea of a republic and what Publius was saying here, back in the day, the farthest that you would have to travel to get to D.C. to make these decisions in a democracy, right, was from Georgia, right? I think that would be the farthest you would go because it was down south and you had to go up. Blah, blah, blah. Nowadays, you'd have to travel from Alaska and Hawaii, which would be one hell of a journey just to go cast a vote, on behalf of what you're trying to do for your community. So I understand why he was, or why the folks at the time, the anti-federalists at the time, were worried about why, a democracy or why a republic wouldn't quite work. But we live in a different day and age now. And it's time to start being a little bit more protective of these founding principles that we have.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you actually touched on a lot of the points that Madison or Publius makes in the paper. So let's get on into it. What he also says, and this is something I love to talk about, what Publius looks at previous people, what they were saying. He says that a lot of the people that were worried about the idea of a constitution, that were worried it's, a democracy is not going to work, that had written about it, they are some celebrated authors, so at the time, celebrated authors that were against these concepts. And he said that they were subjects of either an absolute or limited monarchy. They were struggling or being oppressed under that. And so if you think about what we have in America today, the concept of classical liberalism, the concept of American freedom and economic independence, everything this country is, it had not existed yet. And so everybody at the time had really only been living in a certain style, which was a monarchy, whether absolute or limited, and their ability to picture what America could become was also quite limited. So Publius says, these celebrated authors, being subjects of either an absolute or limited monarchy, have endeavored to heighten the advantages or palliate, and is that how you pronounce it? Palliate?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Have endeavored to heighten the advantages or palliate the evils of those forms by placing in comparison with them the vices and defects of the Republican, and by citing as specimens of the latter the turbulent democracies of ancient Greece and modern Italy. Under the confusion of names, this is the big one, it has been an easy task to transfer to a republic observations applicable to a democracy only, and among others, the observation that it can never be established but among a small number of people living within a small compass of territory. Now, that makes total sense to me that if you're thinking that this is going to be a democracy, then you would be worried about the size. You would be worried about travel and distance back then. But it's all about language and messaging and miscommunication. I see that with the issue today of socialism, where you see, well, democratic socialism is going to be different, or socialism's never been tried before, and then we have to explain it to them that Denmark isn't socialism, it's capitalism with large government programs, it's a social democracy. We could go on and on, but the problems of politics with messaging, with language, with words and distortions of meanings, this was happening back then too. Now, thinking of that in modern day, what are your thoughts on things like the Washington Post and the left? Like I said earlier, do you think that it's intentional that they would do this? Do you think that it's just a growing ignorance in our country where we can't even label our system of government properly now?
Oh, it's incredibly intentional. Of course it's intentional, right? Because the idea of a democracy sounds phenomenal. It really does, right? It harkens back to this idea of direct representation of what you as an individual want. Our nature is to be self-interested. It always is, right? That's just kind of the long and short of it. We're nasty, we're brutish, we're short, and we want what's best for ourselves. So democracy is inherently self-serving. That means that whenever you can start throwing this word around like there is a threat to our democracy, right, then that means, and that makes people's minds trigger, and they're like, oh, that means that's a threat to me. That's a threat to my voice, to my vote, to my ability to participate in our government, right? I always think it's interesting, too. You know how often you hear people, specifically on the left, they refer to our democracy, right? Our democracy. And there's like this strong emphasis. There's a stress on the possessive, our, right? But the reality is that they kind of want to have it both ways. So they say it's our democracy and we're all involved in it. But at the end of the day, we're not a democracy, obviously. So all of the decision-making power, it still ends up in their hands, in the elected officials' hands, right? So it doesn't really belong to us at all. We ceded that to them a long time ago. So for them to try and have it both ways, and they say the shiny thing over here is our democracy and it matters to us and it's under assault, but then they go up there and they make their own decisions, it's actually fundamentally dishonest and it's destructive to everything that the founders built. And the question is, who does this republic actually belong to? Because at the end of the day, a republic belongs to the people. It really does. Because we have the power to send folks to D.C. to work on behalf of us. When they say our democracy, they're saying that the republic belongs to them, to the elites, to the plutocrats, right? To the elected officials. They want to have absolute and total control over everything that we do, right? And they want to make everything, they want to give all the power back to themselves. They really do. And so whenever they start saying, oh, it's a threat to our democracy, what they really mean is it's a threat to their power, their ability to influence our lives, their ability to control everything we do, their ability to shut us down and to stifle dissent. We see this. If we give these people too much power, they will abuse it.
Oh, yeah.
They always do. Yeah. They always do. And the most self-serving thing that they could do is to make us feel like we have a voice, just to appease us, I guess, or make us quiet.
That's how socialists work. That's how look at the People's Republic of China and every other communist dictatorship, dictatorial regime that exists has the people's blah, blah, blah. There's some sort of name like that.
It's all BS.
And it's because under socialism, they tell you that the people own the means of production. The people own the land and the goods and everything. And it's such a lie because it's the government that controls and owns and runs everything, but they just do it in the name of the people. And so that really gives me the same kind of similar feel. Let's get into what Publius is saying because he gives some examples for why people are worried about the size. The first thing is that as the natural limit of a democracy is that distance from the central point, which will just permit the most remote citizens to assemble as often as their public functions demand, and will include no greater number than can join in those functions, so the natural limit of a republic is that distance from the center, which will barely allow the representatives of the people to meet as often as may be necessary for the administration of public affairs. Now, that being said, he goes in to say, in the first place, it is to be remembered that the general government is not to be charged with the whole power of making and administering laws. Its jurisdiction is limited to certain enumerated objects which concern all the members of the republic, but which are not to be attained by the separate provisions of any. The subordinate governments which can extend their care to all those other objects which can be separately provided for will retain their due authority and activity. Were it proposed by the plan of the convention to abolish the governments of the particular states, its adversaries would have some ground for their objection, though it would not be difficult to show that if they were abolished, the general government would be compelled by the principle of self-preservation to reinstate them in their proper jurisdiction. So right there, the first worry is, okay, you can really only grow a democracy to the size that allows all citizens to still attend and still show up. They have to be able to travel for all these votes and decision making. But then also it says, but the big federal government that we're making that you guys are so worried about, it's not going to be that big at all because we're still going to have state power. You're still going to have these local jurisdictions where they have their own responsibilities and rules. And that's kind of what you and I were touching on earlier, where we've gotten so far away from that concept that now most of our lives are controlled by Washington, D.C. They do make most decisions, and they do have a rope around the neck of local jurisdictions and states when they weren't supposed to.
Right. And so maybe it would feel better to a lot of people to be able to say, hey, I would like to go to Washington, D.C. and make my voice heard, right? But then they tell us that's bad and you can't do that. And then you can't, go to your capital and they build walls around it. And the next thing you know, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to them.
Well, what you said earlier of the people really own the republic.
Yeah, of course they do.
The people do not run the republic or have power in the republic unless they know that they have power in the republic, unless they understand what their powers are. Most people don't. And I always talk about Biden's executive mandates, and then they were pushed through OSHA as some stupid, workplace mandate, whatever it was for the vaccine mandates. But most people don't understand that in this country, a president cannot executive order mandate you through the executive bureaucracy to get something injected into your body. There is the local protection. There are just your power as a person. That's enough power to fight back.
God-given protection.
God-given protection, individual protection with the Bill of Rights, with the constitutional rights that you have. There's local protection, state. You have multiple layers of protections and powers that you can use to fight back against these people. But instead, Americans don't understand this, and they look at the rulings from Washington, D.C., and they say, oh, those are the changes. The bigger problem that I have with that as well is because we have no understanding of what our power is in this government, what our state and local power is to fight back against D.C., and we just see all of our problems and solutions coming from this one place, it seems too far out of our reach for us to have any positive impact or change. We don't look and say, what can I do in my community? Instead, we say, our congressional representative or Joe Biden did this, or our president, whoever's in office, did this. We have to understand that when we take power back from D.C., it gives us power not only because these idiots don't have power over our lives anymore, but it also gives us power in the sense that we have more greater ability to bring change, to provide change at a state and local level.
Yeah, and here's the funny thing is that there's a lot of people who say that we shouldn't be a republic, right? They say that we have to have direct election of our representatives, that we have to start being more democratic in how we do these things. All of that really is just, it's a sick code for saying, I don't like the results of how these elections go in our republic, so I want to fundamentally flip it and change it and make it all worse. But in reality, we do have democracy in America. We are a democratic republic, right? We can agree on that. At the state and local level, we are, generally speaking, a pure democracy. We elect the school board members like that. We elect mayors like that. We elect city council. We elect our state house, our state representatives, and our governors, generally speaking, in a pure democracy. So you can have it both ways. But when you start to try and take the effects and the impacts that a democracy like that has, a direct democracy like that has, on a national level, and that's what Madison was warning about, that's when it gets really, really sticky and it gets tough. And it all goes back to how things used to work in ancient Greece, right? So a lot of the arguments that they're making here are based on the ability to travel and participate, et cetera, et cetera. The system that we have in place fixes all of it, right? Because like I said, your local elections, they're democracies. That's how it used to work in Greece. You would go to the town center, which was usually like the Acropolis, for example, right? In Greece, they were the cornerstones of democracy at the time. What they would do actually is they would break up pieces of pottery, right? Yeah, they break up pieces of pottery into little shards, and then they would use those as their tools by which to vote. And they put them in little pots, and then whoever got the most votes, that's how they would decide on issues for the town and the city and the local, or the polis is what it was called. That works. That works at a local level because everyone could then be involved in it. But the people of Sparta versus the people of, some other region of Greece, for example, they didn't have the same interests. That's why they ended up going to war, right? And so to try and have this democracy that rules over all of the Grecian, lands would never have worked. And that's what Madison was saying. So they had to have a system that counterbalanced both of these things because the Republic worked beautifully in Rome and the democracy worked beautifully in Greece. But at the end of the day, the tyranny of the minority comes into play all the time, right? The tyranny of the majority comes into play all the time.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Yeah. And if we allow for the tyranny of the majority to take rule over America, then we lose everything that makes America exceptional. Because at the end of the day, we don't want, I don't have the same interests as an individual living here in Phoenix as someone who lives in New York City, or someone who lives in Los Angeles, or someone who lives in Chicago, right? Chicago, as Charlie says. So we knew that we had a system that was going to be effective, and they put it in place because it fundamentally represents the entirety of the United States. And that's beautiful to me. I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
But the folks who are up there in D.C. right now, they would much rather have it to where Los Angeles, New York City, and Chicago could decide what happens in all of America, right? They want gas-powered cars to fuel, the folks in Mississippi who just want to drive a truck to and from work, right? And that's such a slap in the face to the average American citizen.
It is.
It's incredibly offensive.
I love seeing some of the things, like people make little comments and it just shows they have no idea how other aspects of the country live. One of them, some liberal journalist did he was on a plane and he took a picture of the ground below and he was like doing something over a flyover state. And so there's all the farmland in the different squares.
Yeah.
Like per acre of different crops and stuff. Right. And he posted a picture and he's like, it looks so cool down there. I wonder why there's all the shapes. And
what are they doing?
Literally tweeted that. And it's like, that's what farmland looks like from above. Another favorite one was, people, have you ever heard somebody make the joke, why do they call them cowboys if they're on horses? It's like, because they move the cows. Right. So it's just like little things like that where city people, and it's not, not saying they're dumb, but it's just, you have no idea how the world works there. For me, I hate to go on metros. I don't want to go on a metro ever. The underground thing's nasty with the rats and all that stuff. We just live different lives, and it means we're going to have different values. And that's what Federalist Paper 10 was about, of bringing everybody together. Right. When it comes to getting these kind of people from different areas put together, one of the other concerns was just the fact that there's not a lot of roads. It's not easy for people to travel. Yeah. We didn't have planes back then, people. So another pitch from Publius was just the fact that if we have a federal government, if we bring all of us together in this union, we'll have more resources and more capabilities to bring people together, whether that's on better roads or with more navigable canals. I didn't say that word right. With more easier, can we cut that out,
navigable.
With more efficient and effective roads, with better canals, with all these different ways where you can travel throughout the country. So that was going to solve one of the problems. Another one, and this is kind of talking about the people that are worried about, having a large republic where someone would have to travel, even if it is a republic and we will only have representatives.
I just want to say before you go on to the next thing, Madison here was actually making a really compelling argument that is not logical but emotional. He was trying to appeal to the average American who just watched us overthrow the British Empire, right? He was making an appeal to them to say, hey, have a little faith in what we as a people can actually accomplish, right? So things are going to get better. When we become a republic, whenever we become like the nation that we are destined to become, we talked about destiny before, it's going to work. You just got to trust us. Appeal to their individualism and their idea of American exceptionalism. And we are going to get roads. We are going to get more navigable canal systems and waterways and things like that, right? I think that's really actually very beautiful because at the end of the day, he's saying, no, democracy is not a great thing, but put a little faith in yourselves, and we're going to have faith in you to build a strong republic, right?
Heck yeah.
It's so beautiful. It really was. Good guy right here. Good busty guy.
Great one. Okay, so the next thing that he talks about, I'm not going to read this quote because I just simply cannot, but I can summarize it for you. Basically, when you are super far away from maybe the middle of the country or the safer hubs where there's more population, you're going to be at risk of invasion. And what he says is basically on all sides of our country right now, it's a frontier or it's the Atlantic Ocean. And so all states that border are at risk of invasion in that aspect, but all states may seem to give the argument of, oh, it's going to be hard for us to send a representative to the national capital if we have this new federal republic that's created. And so Publius says, you guys are most at risk. You're going to need protection. And so the safety and protection that you get with the resources that will come with having a federal government is going to not only match, but outweigh the negatives that might be by just having to send somebody to travel a little far to get to the capital. So that's like a big argument because people were giving that as a big reason for why it's not worth it. And he's saying, you're kidding, right?
And he's making a larger pitch that was like so transcendent, right? And it was much larger than what people were worried about then, right?
Yeah, I always find it interesting. One of the things that is lost quite often is the fact that the countries, the established pieces of ancient Rome, ancient Greece, they stayed quite small and they stayed quite fragile because of it. And so I can't remember what paper this was in, but it's mentioned in a previous paper or maybe a little bit later. I'm getting lost in the book now. But the idea that as the republic grows, if you create it with a strong enough foundation, it'll actually get safer and more secure as it grows because you're growing with your international presence, you're growing with resources and with people and all this stuff, and you're maintaining the small democracies inside of the republic so that you maintain that democratic republic. Because you're right, we do have democracy in the sense that you and I show up at all of those important elections at every level where we pick someone to then go represent us.
Right. Here's one takeaway that I have whenever we talk about democracy, and it always scares me, right? What? So every time that people say our democracy, they're usually really, really scary people, like Ilhan Omar, for example. No, I'm serious.
That's why I'm like, is this intentional that they keep saying democracy?
Of course it's intentional, right? Because at the end of the day, that gives them so much more power. The most scary people in our government come from the most scary places in America, right? Places where you don't want to be, places where crime is rising, places where it's generally less enjoyable to live, places where it's harder to start a family, places where it's harder to just be a good American because there's so much influence from the evils of the world, right? And what I always go back to, right, is we're seeing it more now than ever. These people, the Ilhan Omars of the world, right?
Sorry.
She's terrible. She really is.
She is.
And like, in my opinion, she's a total ingrate. Which just means ungrateful.
Yes.
She's incredibly ungrateful.
She is.
She came here as a war-torn Somalian immigrant, and we gave her everything.
Welfare,
literally
everything she needed.
She goes to Congress by some sort of miraculous miracle of God, and then all of a sudden she tries to use this power to make her political opponents, people that she doesn't like or she disagrees with just generally, lesser. She tries to cut them out of democracy. She tries to cut them out of their role in the republic. What I always go back to is like, these people hate me. Generally speaking, but also generally speaking, they outnumber me, right? The plutocrats in New York City and Manhattan, they outnumber me. They outnumber us. So what recourse do I have if we give them the total and uninhibited power to just by popular vote to decide everything? So the advent of democracy means the death of the citizen. And the other thing is democracy is so easily dilutable. We're seeing that in New York City right now, right? Where 800,000 non-citizens were just given the right to vote in local elections. You can dilute democracy like that because it's so fragile. It's so incredibly fragile. So then you see the death of the American citizen, and then all of a sudden, America's gone. Poof, like that.
Yeah.
Quick.
Well, it's a very fragile system.
So fragile.
And I don't mean that as if it's bad in a fragile way or anything like that, but it's just very fragile in the sense that it was articulately put together.
Right.
Everything was purposeful. And that's what I worry about with the radical left these days is once they gain power in previous countries, Venezuela is a good example.
Venezuela's a democracy.
I mean, Chavez was democratically elected into office. Yeah. And my friend Daniel DiMartino, I don't know if you've met him, he was the first, like when I got into politics, I interviewed survivors of socialism and communism. And he was the first guy I interviewed, and I like hired some camera person per hour or something to like
I remember watching that actually. Yeah. It was good.
A little
when you
silly
came on the scene.
Young Morgan back then. But yeah, I was just kind of like hanging out and doing fun stuff back then. But Daniel had said, I grew up in a middle class family in Venezuela, like just a normal person. And then all of a sudden I went from being a middle class child in the richest country in Latin America to collecting rainwater for drinking water for my family. And how can you imagine that to happen in a country that's doing well like Venezuela? And so when people look at me and I don't know if you saw, there was a comment on our recent podcast episode. Somebody asked if, they said that it was a grim episode. They said that what we were saying is a little aggressive, and they wondered if it was real or if you and I are just giving our projection of the situation and our thoughts on what's going on. And I was like, a lot of people think that if this country fell down, if this went south, it would be this quick, violent thing. But instead, it would look like every other country where it's a slow decay. And then all of a sudden, that decay isn't just decay, it's like decomposition, and it's gone.
Rot.
Yeah. A slow rot from within that ends with massive long-term suffering, and that's what makes me sad. So when you look at the countries where this kind of stuff happened, where Chavez was democratically elected, where Daniel struggled, and now he's in America, thank goodness. But what happened is once they gained power, whether that's by force or election, they strip the protections away that are written into law, that are in the country's constitution or founding documents. And that's what the radical left is trying to do today, whether that's getting rid of the Electoral College, which would really strip away a part of our republic, which or the filibuster. They want to end the filibuster, which is intended to prevent radical, rapid change from taking place in Washington, D.C.
Well, they want a pure democracy in the Senate, right? That's what it is. Just like a 51 vote, that's all it takes, right?
Exactly. All of those little things, that's the kind of stuff that hurts my heart to read, because I know the kind of impact it would have on us. The one thing after another that's going to be stripped away. And when we talk about them gaining power, or by that I mean gaining influence in the minds of young Americans and older Americans, I'm worried about the fact that they are normalizing the idea that we are democracy, the idea that we need to strip these things away because it limits us from progress. That's what they also said in the progressive era of the early 1900s, that Federalist No. 10 is wrong and it's bad because it protects the minority, but the minority is just in the way of the majority. When we talk about that kind of stuff, it's like, no, that's the only reason this country is so successful is because we have these things, and now you're trying to get rid of them.
Right.
Like Ilhan Omar, not even from here.
No.
And you're not even grateful to be here after we got you to this point. Now you're a congressperson trying to strip away the things that made the country great, that gave you refuge. It's disgusting.
It's disgusting. And she should go back somewhere else and get the hell out of America, frankly. That's just my opinion. That's not the opinion of the show or Turning Point or anything like that. But she should get the hell out of America. I don't care for her at all. She's a sick individual. Look, the most powerful person in America right now is from one of the most poor states in America. It's from one of the smallest states in America. It's from one of the most generally uninfluential states in America. But the most powerful man in America right now is not President Joe Biden. It's Senator Joe Manchin, right? I think that that's beautiful because at the end of the day, I'm a conservative, and that means that I want to conserve something that is older than me, that's larger than me, and that's more permanent than I am. And what Joe Manchin is doing right now is he's saying, hey, guys, slow the hell down, right?
Yep.
Because what you're trying to do is radically transform something that has worked for 200 plus years into something that we have seen fail time and time again. Look at Venezuela, look at China, look at Cuba, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you know? It's a good thing that we have guardrails. Everything that the left does is to try and destroy the guardrails that prevent a descent into chaos. And if we let them do that, you know, through their means, however they want to do it, then like I keep saying, we're going to lose the country. And so the only thing that's stopping them from doing that is the fact that we have a beautiful Republican system that allows for checks and balances and that allows for general order. I'm worried, though, that if they just keep getting frustrated, and there's a reason why abolishing the filibuster is called the nuclear option, right? Is because at the end of the day, it is. If you just get rid of the filibuster and you say, boom, 51 votes, that's how you do it, it's how it's always going to be done from here on out, then next thing you know, all of these fundamental rights start getting stripped, and maybe we do abolish the Electoral College. And then maybe we do become a strict and pure democracy across the entire United States. And again, I go back to this idea. These people hate me. They outnumber me. What's my recourse against that? Right now, it's the filibuster. Right now, it's the Electoral College. Right now, it's the fact that there's 9 justices on the Supreme Court. But all of that changes the moment that they go to a pure majoritarian system. Majoritarianism equals every single time authoritarianism. And we have to be very, very careful whenever we have these conversations. So you're right. Language is a powerful thing. And if we keep normalizing this idea of democracy or whatever that is, right, then we're going to see things start to fade away really, really quickly.
I one day, not because I'm trying to be Laura Ingalls Wilder, even though I love her books.
Love her books.
I just love the idea of being reliant on only myself, not the government, not the systems, anything like that, a more simple life. And so I want my property, I want to grow my own food, I want all my business stuff to be on my property, etc. So people look at that and they think, oh, Morgan, you're trying to hide from the communists that are coming. Like, is that why you're homesteading? And I'm like, no, I'm a simple girl, like country girl, and I just want to do that. But I also am very anti-big government and anti-communist. That being said, though, my lovely friends, unfortunately, if you look at any of the history where what is it called? Majoritism?
Majoritarianism.
Majoritarian? Okay. Did you make that up?
That might not be a real word, but I think it is.
Well, Connor, I love it. Thank you for coining this. Majoritarianism. I've always worried about this because when you look at history, what happens when there aren't these protections that are in America, when there aren't these things like a large republic with multiple layers of checks and balances, the majority that usually is on the radical left, and these people are anti-private property, they're against they're against private land ownership, they hate the evil landowners, the farmers, all the things. If you look at Cuba, any other country where this happened, especially the USSR, they go right after them, okay? So there's nothing, if I had a homestead and I was fully self-reliant on it and made my own food, there's no stopping those kind of people from showing up one day and using their government resources, their movement's resources to take my land from me and kill me. That's what happens every single time. And so what we have here in America, the only reason something like that has not happened yet is because we have protections against these radical city people, these radical people that are liberal, that are leftist, that don't understand our way of life, that want to end our way of life and see it as selfish, whether it's like Yellowstone, John Dutton, everybody's like, it shouldn't be, a white man can't own that much property to himself. It's evil. I don't care if you think it's evil. It's my property.
It's my God-given right.
It's John Dutton's property, whatever you want to say. But it's those, they're never going to see our way of life as normal. They're always going to think we are adverse to them, and they're always going to want to stop us. That's the difference. You and I want to be left alone. We want them to be left alone. We all want to live in liberty. They don't want us to be able to live the way that we live. That's the big difference. And the only thing saving us right now are these protections that they're trying to get rid of. It's like, God bless our founders for doing this. But man, screw the people, screw the system, screw the public education system, the politicians, everybody that is working against this right now. It's disgusting.
Yeah. No,
but at least I'm like, hey, the listeners out there, we're going to slowly grow. The hundreds that listen, or whoever's out there that's like listening right now, please become a community leader. Take these lessons and move forward, and understanding that this starts at a local and then state level. Because here's the thing, Connor, I'm gonna get a little mad right now.
Do it.
I am so disheartened by what we see at the federal level. And so mandates, here we go again, right? Mandates. What do you know? The Senate is trying to pass legislation that would stop these mandates from being passed down. Jen Psaki, President Biden, they say, okay, we're going to veto that. If you guys try and prevent us from doing this, we're going to veto that. Now, you would think that this display of the Senate trying to stop you from doing something so forceful to humans would be enough for you to say, wow, the checks on my power are pretty clear now. The American people are against this. Unfortunately, we have such an idiot in chief, James Madison and the rest of them. They saw this guy coming. They saw tyrants like this. But I also think that they knew we might have idiots. They knew that we might be in such a deep problem that a check within the federal government of like one branch on the other, like we should be seeing right now with the veto of the mandate, that is going to get, or not the veto, but the Senate trying to stop the mandate. When a Biden looks at that and says, I'm going to veto you now, what a disgrace. Okay, that should be a check on power that he takes and says, you're right, I'm in the wrong here. The American people are against this. But it's not going to happen because the Overton window has shifted so much. So the solution, thanks to our founders, is that we are a republic. We do have multiple layers of power, and the states and the localities, the state, local law enforcement groups, everybody at those levels needs to start understanding that the only thing to fix this now, because the federal government won't check itself anymore, it's the only way to fix this. State and local checks on this power now.
That's totally correct.
You know what I mean?
I think I know what you mean. And
I'm frustrated.
I'm glad you got mad about it, because you should be mad about it. I will say one thing. You called him an idiot.
I'm sorry.
No, I have much harsher words for him that I can't say on here. But the thing is that, and this is going to the inherent dangers of a democracy, it takes a lot of idiots to elect an idiot like that. Right?
It does. It does.
And if we were to just say, screw it, we're a democracy now, then we would be ruled literally by the will of deeply uneducated, deeply unhappy, deeply masochistic, and generally speaking, cruel idiots. And they would be the ones who hold more power than the enlightened thinking beings that I like to consider ourselves to be a part of, right?
Oh, thanks, Connor.
Sure, I think you're okay.
You think I'm enlightened?
No, you're all right. But no, at the end of the day, this is really it's a check. Our republic is a check on the will of the mob. There's a saying. I think it was Santayana who said it, but I could be totally wrong. But could be totally wrong actually. But it's people will do in a mob what they would never do as an individual, right? So if you get folks fired up enough about something, then they're going to start to act out of the realm of reason and logic and any sort of, check and balance on human nature, which again, like I said earlier, was nasty, brutish, and short. And that's when you get really, really sick things start to happen. 2 years after this was published, we saw that in action with the French Revolution, right? We see mobs of people get really upset with what's happening in France, and then they basically they storm the Bastille, and then they overthrow the French government, and they start cutting people's heads off, right? That's what mobocracy is. And mobocracy is very closely related to democracy. And it's deeply, deeply unwise as a system to adopt.
Did you make up that word too, or
mobocracy? I've heard that before. I've
Okay.
heard that might not be a real
you are
word,
killing it today.
but I have heard that word before. I'm going to get Merriam-Webster to hire me. I'm going to start making up words.
Oh, they
for 'em.
only change definitions and make
That's
words
right.
for the left.
Yeah,
Which they've done like 5 times
we got to
this
start
year.
our own dictionary company.
We could probably sell a couple books like that.
I think so. Yeah, but no, the mob is a really dangerous thing, and if you start to cede to the will of the mob, Thomas Hardy called it the maddening crowd, right? Then you really, really start to lose your fundamental rights as a human being. You talked about private property. I said this on an episode before where Jefferson, when he was writing the Declaration, he said that we have inherent rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The original draft was that we have rights to life, liberty, and property. And it was assumed the property would just always be involved in the pursuit of happiness, right? But now we really need it codified that property is an inherent right, and everything that the left is aiming to do is to destroy the right of private property. So the first thing that they do, the moment that we become this democracy, whatever the hell that is they're going to start going after all of that. Property, no. Everything belongs to me, the state, the government, the Ilhan Omars of the world, and we get to make all the decisions for you. Right?
Have you seen Yellowstone?
No, but I keep meaning to watch it.
So people
Is it
always
good?
ask me about it because I don't know, I'm just like, I love country music. I love the outdoor lifestyle. I always want to talk about homesteading and getting property. So people assumed that I knew what Yellowstone was and that I've been watching it, but I haven't. So a couple days ago, I bought Peacock TV and I started watching it. And literally one of the first scenes is John Dutton owns all this land in Yellowstone, right? And he is a cattle rancher and the left hates that. I mean, for multiple reasons. So white man owning land, white man doing cattle ranching, which is like, climate change, we're going to die in 10 years, stuff like that. And so there's this tour bus on his property of these Chinese people, and they can't speak English. The only person that speaks English is the tour guide. And so John Dutton is like, what are these people doing? He gets out of his truck, he pulls out, and there's a grizzly bear. They're taking pictures with a grizzly bear behind them. So he goes out and he gets his gun and he's like, get out of the way. And he's telling these people, and they don't know what he's saying. Right. So the tour guide is like, they're fine, they're fine. So then he's like, what are you doing? You're on my property. And so then she tries to explain to the tour people that this is this man's property, he wants you to go, and they won't leave.
Right.
And if you think, it's like they see government and roles of what government and what property and all these things are differently because they're literally from China. They can't speak English. And so she looks at John Dutton and she says, they don't think it's right. They don't understand. You own all this land. This should be the people's land. And I'm watching this like, how have I never seen this show before? Like Chinese communists are saying John Dutton's land should be owned by the people. What? In like one of the first episodes, this show's amazing. Yeah. And so John Dutton's like, get the heck out of here. So he kicks him out. Good. And it's just amazing. But let's finish this off with this because I just had to add that in. I just discovered the show and it's such a Morgan show. So
I'll have to check it out.
This is how Publius ends the paper. And then Connor, I want you to wrap it up with a little summary of why this is your favorite paper, or one of. So Publius says, had no important step been taken by the leaders of the revolution for which a precedent could not be discovered, no government established of which an exact model did not present itself, the people of the United States might at this moment have been numbered among the melancholy victims of misguided counsels, must at best have been laboring under the weight of some of those forms which have crushed the liberties of the rest of mankind. Happily for America, happily we trust for the whole human race, they pursued a new and more noble course. They accomplished a revolution which has no parallel in the annals of human society. They reared the fabrics of government which have no model on the face of the globe. They formed the design of a great confederacy, which it is incumbent on their successors to improve and perpetuate. If their works betray imperfections, we wonder at the fewness of them. If they erred most in the structure of the Union, this was the work most difficult to be executed. This is the work which has been new modeled by the act of your convention, and it is that act on which you are now to deliberate and to decide. Publius.
It's beautiful. What strikes me with that is that these people knew that they took not only the weight of the citizens of the United States at the time, or whatever it was at the time, they were taking the weight of humanity on their shoulders. They were taking on the weight of posterity on their shoulders. They were taking on the weight of the future on their shoulders. And they knew that if we could just get this done, if we could just ratify this beautiful, beautiful document, that not only would America be a better place, but the entire face of the earth would be a better place, the entire globe, the future of humanity. And that's, generally speaking, that's probably why this is one of my favorite papers, is because it is so forward-thinking and it is so well enumerated, the idea that America is such an exceptional place and that we are such an exceptional people. And it's something that is so worth protecting, and that's what a republic does, is that it protects the ability for this to sustain longer than just, the frivolous will of idiot people. America can never, never, never be brought down by mob rule. It can never be brought down by, an insurrection going and storming a building or whatever, because we have protections against these things. And those protections are not to run and, hide under the veil of democracy. The protections are embedded in our system that allow for checks and balances and bulwarks against the tyranny of the majority. And that's great. And I like that a lot.
Oh, I love that too. Well, thank you for joining. I would just, to repeat kind of the things that you said, the only reason we've achieved such greatness and such true progress, not progressive regress, which is what they always like to achieve when they implement their leftist ideas. We have only achieved such true progress because of the system of checks and balances. And a lot of that is because we have an expansive system that is republicanism and not democracy. We have the small democracies at the local and state level, but at the end of the day, we have a republic, and that's something we should be proud of. It's not something that we should be shamed for or told to call a democracy.
A patriarchal, oppressive system, created by white men or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. They're trying to distort this stuff, but I hope that everybody listening today really got a good understanding of why people call out the Washington Post, why we call out the leftists that say, Hillary Clinton saying our democracy is at risk if we don't do blah, blah, blah for the next election. It's like, ma'am, please. Right. Miss, please calm down. Okay, you're lying to the people. And it's not just ignorance. It may be ignorance because our public education system didn't teach all of the citizens properly, but it's not ignorance when the top national leaders call it democracy. It's intentional disinformation and misguidance, and that's where we have to pay attention. You guys deserve to know this stuff. So please take this information, pass it along to other people in your life that we are a proud republic. Be proud of it. Spread the news about it. And Connor, thanks for joining for Paper 14, Federalist Paper 14. You guys remember to follow Freedom Papers Podcast on Instagram, where we show a lot of the behind-the-scenes kind of stuff and all the fun reels with music on them. But thank you so much, and thanks to Turning Point USA. If you go to tpusa.com/freedompapers, you will be able to see all the ways to access this podcast. But thanks, Connor.
Thanks, Morgan.
Have a nice week, guys.
How much does the earth cost? I'm gonna buy the entire earth.
Hey everyone, Jon Root here. Stick around because coming up next on TPUSA Live, Alex Clark hosts a special Pop Doc episode of POPlitics where she explains the terrifying consequences of Big Gov. Next on POPlitics.
The name Ruby Ridge is enough to send chills down the spines of those who know its story. For those who are unfamiliar, it's a name that incites curiosity. What is Ruby Ridge? Who lived it, and what happened to them? These are all questions I will answer today. This story is a tragic tale of how one family found themselves on the top of a mountain where their lives would take a dramatic turn. It's a story of just how far government overreach has gone in modern American history. Today, more than ever before, it needs to be told. I'm Alex Clark, and this is Ruby Ridge Siege, Mayhem and Massacre on the Mountaintop. In the early 1990s, the Weavers were just your average American family. Randy and Vicki Weaver were God-fearing people with a desire to raise their children in a remote part of Idaho, away from the government they believed would be instrumental in ushering in the end of the world. Randy and Vicki Weaver married in Iowa in 1971. He had enlisted in the Green Berets before their wedding, and Vicki had always been fiercely independent. They were a bit of a match made in heaven because they shared the same religious views, skepticism of the government, and the idea that the world was going to end and they needed to be prepared. They also wanted to live in a place removed from society. 5 years after their wedding, they had their first child, Sarah, and eventually welcomed Samuel and Rachel. During the years the Weavers were starting their family, Vicki began claiming that she was having visions of a mountaintop where their family would live in order to protect themselves from the apocalypse. They actively prepared. Randy collected a lot of firearms and Vicki studied survivalist skills. In the meantime, they also started a Bible study, which only fueled their anxiety over a Zionist organized government. Yikes. In 1983, they acted on their worry and bought 20 acres in Idaho, which we now know as Ruby Ridge. 1 year later, after constructing their home themselves, they officially became mountain residents. Vicki took up gardening and they homeschooled their kids. Then they took in Kevin Harris, a rough around the edges teenager. They were isolated, not just in their beliefs, but physically. All they had was one another. So Randy went looking for a community they could join. One of the most controversial elements to this story is Randy's involvement with the Aryan nations. And, well, obviously, this is rightfully controversial of him given the immorality of the group's beliefs and its blatant racism. One could argue that had he stayed away from this group, the incident at Ruby Ridge may have never occurred. You are the company you keep, after all. Some say that Randy primarily joined the group in efforts to socialize his family. They were new to the area and especially isolated due to their location of their house. Their interactions were few in the grand scheme of things. Randy even insists that he did nothing illegal with the group itself. He did, however, act criminally when he got desperate for money. The Weavers were not wealthy. They lived a humble life in the mountains and at times subsided off their garden and whatever else they could forage for themselves. Still, they were struggling. And so when Randy finally decided to come up with a solution, he unfortunately turned to the worst person in the Aryan nation to make an illegal sale of an illegal object to, an ATF informant. Randy sold the informant 2 sawed-off shotguns, which is a federal offense. I don't condone the company he kept, and I don't condone him breaking the law whatsoever, but I also can't imagine how he felt when he learned that he had landed himself in hot water with the very people he'd moved to the mountains to avoid. Randy wasn't one to flippantly commit crimes. This one instance seemed to be an isolated event. His decisions were totally wrong. But you move to the literal middle of nowhere, and your biggest nemesis, big government, is still there, in secret. And of all the terrible people they could pick from, you happen to make the perfect wrong decision. Life choices truly have terrifying consequences, ones that are realized quickly and others that have ripple effects down the line. So he committed a federal crime and needed to be punished, right? Like I said, Randy was surrounded by some bad people. He wasn't really a concern for officials. In fact, he became way more useful to them as they attempted to infiltrate the Aryan nations more and more. The ATF gave him 2 options: become an informant himself and the charges would be dropped, or face the consequences of his illegal sale. Randy basically told the government to get lost by denying the offer and refusing to work alongside them against the Aryan nations. The Weaver's daughter Sarah recalled in an interview that as her parents made their way way home in the snow with their kids, they stopped to help what looked like a couple who had broken down. The couple, however, were actually government officials there to arrest Randy. Both he and Vicky were wrestled down in the cold, and Randy was taken to jail. He ended up posting their mountaintop home as bond. Randy was now in a far graver predicament than when he sold the sawed-off shotguns. His refusal to cooperate certainly wasn't going to help his case, and he could not afford to lose everything. He was assigned a court date for the gun charges, but never made it in. Reports say that he missed the court date because he was given the wrong date. All of this sounds both fishy and convenient, but maybe the truth is just that his skepticism of the system made him a no-show. Who knows? Whatever the case, Randy's predicament was now in the hands of the U.S. Marshals. The Weaver family isolation went on for 17 months until their lives changed forever. Some choices have ripple effects that only showed themselves months later. In this case, it was going to cost the Weaver family everything. On August 21st, 1992, U.S. Marshals were staked out and prepared to ambush the Weaver property to finally arrest Randy. Remember, the property was isolated in the mountains, not far from the Canadian border. I imagine it was quiet enough to hear sticks cracking beneath feet as people scaled the landscape. It was summer. The Weavers were more isolated than ever before. They'd spent a long winter alone on the mountain with their children. Vicky had even birthed their daughter, Elisheba, in isolation. The tension of knowing that Randy had a target on his back was mounting, and in one day, that very target became lethal. I wonder if the Weavers knew they were being watched. Had they felt, in all of their suspicion of the government, that they were watched way before they moved to the mountains? Did they feel like they were being watched before Randy was found out by an undercover agent? Just think about all of that pent-up anxiety, the feeling that at any moment you could be ambushed in some way. You just don't know when or how. If they expected the government to show up on their doorstep, I doubt they ever thought that it would all start the way it did. So on a summer morning, U.S. Marshals forced their way onto the Weavers' property, fully armed. They were clearly ready for a confrontation. I can't be sure what their plan was, if they were going to storm the house or if they were really going to try and capture Randy as subtly as possible. It's been reported that they were merely there to scope out the situation further. Also, I have to know, what did they think of children being on the premises? They'd already been watching them with cameras. Who did they think they'd encounter first if they wandered too far onto the property? The Weaver's dog was the first to sense trouble on the property, alerting both the household and the U.S. Marshals. Randy and Sam Weaver and Kevin Harris went to see what the commotion was. Sarah, the eldest daughter, decided to go home. Within minutes, there was gunfire, multiple shots. Billy Deegan, one of the marshals, had been hit. The Weaver family claims that Randy, Sam, and Harris came upon officials donned in their uniforms and that the dog was shot and killed first. As a retaliation, Sam allegedly shot at the marshals, who then allegedly shot back and killed him. The marshals, however, claim that Kevin shot first and killed Billy Deegan. What actually happened may always stay on top of that mountain, stuck in time that fateful morning. Sam's death changed the Weavers' lives more than anything else had. Now, they weren't just a family with a fugitive father, but they, as a whole, were a grieving family that had just lost a child. Their isolation was only furthered if such a thing was possible. On the other end of the situation, the case changed hands yet again. Now, the FBI was involved, and Randy Weaver was basically the most wanted person in the country. The FBI was ready to confront the Weavers with everything it had. In fact, agents were permitted to use deadly force against the Weavers. Next day, a grieving Randy and Kevin went outside to check on Sam's body, which had been stored in a shed. Within moments, a gunshot rang out the property and got Randy. Traumatized Vicky began screaming for her wounded husband and Kevin to come back to the house. She stood at the door of her home, baby in her arms, ushering in Sarah, Randy, and Kevin, when another shot blasted through the entrance of the home. With the blast came a splatter all over Sarah's face. Then she realized what had happened as her mom, Vicky, dropped to the floor directly behind her, with her baby sister still in hand. At the time, Sarah was just a teenager. Randy picked the baby up, and the surviving members of the household tried to compose themselves as snipers laid in wait outside. Eventually, officials found Sam's body in the shed, and word traveled down the mountain that a child had been murdered. Something that's very suspicious about this situation is how little the government let on about what was actually going on. To some extent, I understand that the public doesn't need to know everything about an active case, yet from this vantage point, it looks like there was a massive miscommunication, not just with the public, but within the government agencies. Even more grim, authorities didn't seem to realize that Vicky had been murdered too. Officials would call out to Vicky through speakerphones, only adding to the grief and stress of those still inside the Weaver home. It seemed cruel and insensitive. Finally, Randy had had enough and began yelling back, a dramatic shift from his usual silence. Officials felt that appealing to Vicky would help them get to Randy. Meanwhile, her body lay dead in the kitchen. Okay, pause. How? How could the FBI not know that they had killed Vicky? She was killed by world-class snipers who know their target from insane distances and do not miss. They are trained to fire accurately. It is beyond me that she could get shot so accurately and no one knew about it. And then they ask her to bring the kids out with pancakes while her remaining children, her daughters, sit inside terrified of losing anyone else. I'm just so sick over this. There were hundreds of feds outside and only 5 civilians inside, 3 of which were children. Anyway, the FBI made attempts to negotiate, much to no success. The media coverage raged on with one-sided narratives. There was little to no compassion for this family. Again, Randy had committed a crime, but this was also an average American family that had now been through unreasonable trauma. There was no world where he would ever trust the government before the siege began, and there was no way they'd get an inkling of his trust ever now. The FBI had to look beyond its team and get on Randy's level. Cue Bo Gritz. He'd been a presidential candidate and Green Beret like Randy. Bo was more than eager to help. 8 days after the ordeal began on Ruby Ridge, Bo was taken up the mountain to negotiate with Randy, who recognized him immediately. One of the first things Randy told Bo was that the FBI had not just badly wounded Randy and Kevin, but that Vicky had been killed. If ever there was a time for the FBI to start some self-reflection, that was it. And now the public knew just how dire this hopeless situation was. The next day, Bo negotiated with Randy to allow Kevin to leave the house so that he could receive care. It's likely Kevin would have died soon had Randy not let him leave. Then Bo brought a body bag for Vicky. The end of the ordeal was near, and the grieving Weavers knew it. Bo went inside and found Randy with the girls, in tears. On the very last day, Randy informed Bo that his daughters refused to come out and would only exit if killed by authorities. Bo was not having that. The door then opened, and Randy surrendered with the girls. The siege was over. The Weaver family held hands with Bo, and they began their descent down the mountain they'd been on for so many months. Randy Weaver and Kevin Harris both went to trial for murder charges. However, in the middle of their trial, government overreach, once again over firearms, was underway in Waco, Texas. Even more people, including children, died. The jury was specifically instructed to not pay attention to Waco, but on July 8th, 1993, the long deliberation came to an end when Randy and Kevin were acquitted of the murder charges. All Randy was convicted of was failure to make his court appearance from 2 years prior. Eventually, Randy was compensated $3 million for the deaths of Vicky and Sam, and the sniper who killed Vicky was charged with manslaughter, only for the charges to be dropped. Randy and his daughters are still alive today. Sarah is perhaps the most recognizable of the family. She wrote a book with her dad, and she's spoken out the most about that fatal siege and the lives of her mom and brother. Her faith in God, she says, has brought healing to her life. I wanted to tell this story today because it's one that people my age don't seem to be familiar with. I think it's a huge lesson in nuance. You can view Randy's actions as criminal, and we should all condemn his involvement with the Aryan nations, but you can do both of those while still seeing how far the government overreached. Randy's actions had consequences, but he didn't fire the guns that killed his son and wife. There were around 400 officials against this man on a mountain who just wanted to be left alone. And in the end, the very legal system that went after him with an iron fist acquitted him of a murder charge and left him with a lifetime of grief. America is a great country, but no system is perfect, and too much government never ends well for innocent American citizens. The more we tell stories like these, the more likely we are to learn from past mistakes, see situations from all sides, even if it makes us uncomfortable, and know how and when to spot government overreach. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, I have a treat for you, another Pop Doc. This one all about the Waco siege, because it's Halloween week, and nothing is scarier than big government, or should I say spoopy. If you're really into the storytelling episodes, you will love my new podcast on Spotify and Apple called The Spillover, where I interview people with jaw-dropping stories just like this one. Who knows, maybe I'll reach out to Sarah Weaver and see if she can come on. The best way to support POPlitics is to like this episode, let me know in the comments if you knew about this case and what you think, share this Pop Doc to your stories, and hit that save button. It's pop culture without the propaganda every single day. I'm Alex Clark, and this is POPlitics. Support POPlitics, the first ever conservative pop culture daily show, by subscribing to our channel, turning on notifications, and of course, hitting the thumbs up. Also, our main home is on Instagram. Seriously, just trust me, that's where the real magic happens. Follow us there at POPlitics.